Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Hogwarts, starting from creating the Lord of the Rings. Chapter 81. Around 11 o'clock, the invited guests came to Shelby Manor one after another. Some of the more important guests arrived, and Jimmy took Artel to meet him in person. Artel had no interest in these so-called bigwigs. After all, they were just a bunch of muggles. And since the top of the Shelby family was warned by Freddy that day, they didn't dare to play wizards again, so they put their minds back on business. On Christmas Day, the giant bear in the north disintegrated, and the whole world changed dramatically. For all interested forces, this is a rare opportunity and challenge, and the Shelby family held this unprecedented grand party to unite many tycoons in Birmingham to get enough in this Western carnival. Interests. After dealing with several guests, Artel saw that it was almost time, and came to the door of the manor with Sophia. Various cars were parked in the small square outside the manor, and the housekeeper brought more than a dozen members of the Razor party to do reception work at the door. "Master, why did you come out?" The man who spoke was the manor housekeeper, named John, Freddy's loyal servant, who was said to have been hand-picked by Artel's grandfather and grew up with Freddy. "I'm here to see if the friends I invited have arrived." Artel glanced at his pocket watch. It was 11:30. The Granger, 570, couple were to drive from Manchester at about the same time. "A guest you personally invited. That's a real guest," John said with a smile. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the intersection in the distance. "I think they should be here soon." Before John could finish speaking, a small white car appeared at the intersection. Artel nodded. He had seen it yesterday, and it was indeed Mr. Granger's car. "They're here." The butler nodded and stepped forward gently. The car stopped at a place in the small square. John walked up quickly, and kindly opened the door for Mr. Granger. "Hello, thank you for coming on time," John said with a smile, took 3 invitations from Mr. Granger, and politely brought the 3 to the door. 2 members of the Razor party tried to search, but were stopped by Artel. "They don't need to check, it's a guest I personally invited." "Yes." The 2 walked back without any hesitation. The Grangers were a little hesitant. They looked at the polite butler and the manor behind Artel, and they had a lot of guesses in their hearts. As for Hermione, this heartless girl was opening her mouth in surprise, looking at the huge manor behind Artel. "Merlin's beard. Is this your home, Artel? I feel like it's the size of Hogwarts." Hermione was stunned. She had always thought that Artel was from a noble family. After all, because of the name Shelby, Artel also said that Pansy would die. But now it seems that this should not be something that ordinary nobles can do, right? "Maybe about the size of Hogwarts. It's 100 acres. Artel smiled, but John, who was standing behind him, suddenly said, "I'm sorry, Master, but you're wrong. Shelby Manor is 300 acres in size." Now it was Artel's turn to be shocked. "How come my home is so big and I don't even know it?" John seemed to see Artel's doubts. He smiled and said, "When the old owner inherited the manor, it was indeed only 100 acres in size, but then the old owner expanded the horse farm, your father built a swimming pool, as well as a dog farm, hunting ground, etc. Now the area of Shelby Manor has been there are 300 acres. John said, and added another sentence. "Of course, that doesn't include the hill and forest behind the manor, those are also Shelby Manor's properties." All right. Artel looked at Hermione and shrugged. "I swear I didn't know what John said." The Grangers next to him were already numb. The 300-acre manor is 1.2 million square meters. Artel grew up in such a place as a child, no wonder his temperament is so noble and elegant. Having said that, Mr. Granger always felt that the name Shelby family was familiar, but he never remembered where he heard it. Now that I think about it, the Shelby family is probably one of the oldest great nobles. "Let's go first." Artel interrupted Mr. Granger's thoughts. He waved his hand, and the next person drove the scooter over. "The party is on the lawn by the pool, which is a bit far from here, so a scooter is required," Artel explained, and the Grangers looked at each other and nodded mechanically. Hermione suddenly remembered the bet Artel had made with herself, and the pouting old gal asked, "Artel, the yard you're talking about doesn't include these, does it?" "Of course, so are you still trying?" Artel laughed. In such a big yard, if Hermione was given 10 minutes, she couldn't walk to the end. How could she find herself? "Humph, you are fooling yourself." I'm not lying, it's because you didn't know it beforehand. Artel reached out and touched Hermione's head, suddenly remembering that the Grangers were still here. His arms froze slightly, and then shrank back. He looked up and found that the Grangers didn't seem to notice this, so relieved. After all, parents are more concerned about this kind of thing. Maybe it was because Artel was young and had a good relationship with Hermione, so he didn't care. What is the bet you just said? Mrs. Granger hugged Hermione and asked softly. We made a bet. After thinking about it for a while, Hermione still felt that she had to tell her parents about it. After all, a gold watch was too precious, so she told the story one by one. The Grangers were no less shocked to learn that Artel had given Hermione a gold watch for Christmas than to see Shelby Manor. A pure gold handmade pocket watch is probably worth tens of thousands of pounds. Artel just sent it out. However, when they thought of the arrogant manner of the Shelby family, the Grangers didn't seem to be so unacceptable. Artel, we can't have this gift, it's really, really expensive. Of course, Mr. Granger chose to refuse. Uncle Granger, I told Hermione before that preciousness is only relative. A gold watch, as you can see from my home, a gold watch is actually no different from an ordinary watch to me. Artel looked at Hermione and said with a smile. But Hermione is different, she's my best friend at Hogwarts, not to mention. You look down on Hermione too much. Hermione is a talented witch, and a gold watch is not worthy of her. Quote. No way, you're a genius wizard. The professors all praise you. Hermione felt a little embarrassed thinking about what Artel had said to her that day. She was glad in her heart that Artel didn't say the same thing to her parents, otherwise she really didn't know how to deal with them. The Grangers wanted to try, but Artel justly refused. Just a gold watch. Artel's pocket money is more than a gold watch a month. Of course, he never spends money indiscriminately. Soon, the scooter came to the pool, and the cheerful atmosphere shocked the Grangers for the first time, but after the first two events, they were able to control their emotions well. God, look, isn't that Monica? I saw her in a fashion magazine. Mrs. Granger saw a beautiful figure in the pool, and said in a low voice, pulling Mr. Granger's arm. And that, a famous actress, oh. God, I can't believe I met her. Mr. Granger's eyes swept across the swimming pool. The gentleman's demeanor made him effortlessly move his eyes. He looked at the others who were tasting wine, and whispered. Many people here have been on the newspapers and TV. I swear, watching the one drinking, yes, that's the one, that's the giant businessman in Birmingham. It is said that he controls 80% of the medical equipment business in the UK. The two of them whispered. The Grangers never thought that one day they could go to the same party with these people. Mr. Granger, Mrs. Granger, here you are. Jimmy, who was drinking with others, saw the Grangers, his eyes lit up, and he hurried over. In Jimmy's point of view, even the dignitaries in Birmingham can't compare to the Grangers, who made their daughter a wizard. I've been waiting for you for a long time, Mr. Granger, come, let me introduce you to. Jimmy pulled Mr. Granger away kindly, and Mrs. Granger naturally followed behind him, so that only Hermione and Artel were left. Artel quietly gave Jimmy a thumbs up, then took Hermione's hand and walked to the other side. It's too noisy here, I'll take you to another place for a walk. Hermione looked back and saw that her parents were pulled over by Uncle Jimmy to drink with others. She couldn't help but smiled, and said with a wide-eyed smile. Okay. This afternoon, Artel took Hermione to feed his big dog Charlie, then took her to practice shooting, ride horses together, and then went to Artel's secret laboratory. All in all, Hermione can really be said to be eye-opening. In the evening, the two returned to the party for some roast meat and cake, and slipped out again while the Grangers were not paying attention. After the dinner party, Artel returned with Hermione. Most of them have left, and what remains are friends who are really close to the Shelby family, or partners who have real interests. As for the Grangers, they had already returned to the castle. When Artel took Hermione back, Mrs. Granger didn't feel embarrassed to reprimand Hermione, but looking at her eyes, she was actually very worried about Hermione. Because it was a little late, the Hermione family stayed at Shelby Manor at night. Artel and Hermione had a dinner prepared by Sophia in the room before they got up and said goodbye. Today is an unforgettable day for many people. Good night, Artel. In a room in the castle, Hermione whispered something to the window, and then ran back to the bed, recalling everything that happened today, and slowly fell into a deep sleep. In the next room, Mrs. Granger was talking to Mr. Granger about her taking a photo with her idol, and Mr. Granger's mind came out of the pool. Cough cough. What a happy day. The next day, after lunch at Shelby Manor, the Grangers left with Hermione. Artel and Hermione have made an appointment to meet at King's Cross Station at 10 o'clock on January 4th, when they will take the Hogwarts Express back to school together. For the next few days, Artel stayed in the manor and did not go anywhere, but he used the Iselspar to obtain a lot of information. Early on the morning of the 4th, Artel took Jimmy's car to King's Cross Station, and after waiting there for about 10 minutes, he saw Hermione with an excited face. Artel, Hermione asked you to take care of her while she was at school. Before leaving, the Grangers did not forget to remind Artel. Artel naturally agreed, and in the eyes of several people, Artel and Hermione crossed platform 9 3/4 and came to the road leading to Hogwarts. On the platform. It's been boring these days. My mother took me to visit some elders, and I have to deal with their children. My mother and relatives said that I was in secondary school in London, and they said that I didn't get an A in the exam. Well, if I really go to school, I must get full marks in every subject. Hermione raised her small fist, and Suander snorted. Artel laughed dumbly. Hermione's desire to win is still very strong, but the gap between Artel and Artel in Hogwarts is too big, and in the end, he has lost his mind to compete with him. After the two found an empty box and put the salute, Hermione sat down to Artel's side. After a while, the door of the box was opened, and Hermione's face showed a strange expression, a little helpless, a little wary, and a little shy, and her two roommates came in. Twin sisters Flowers. Hey, Hermione, sure enough, it's you. Happy New Year. One of them happily greeted Hermione with a belated blessing. Hello, Artel, Happy New Year. Another person greeted Artel with a smile, and Artel responded with a smile and said Happy New Year to them. How was your vacation? Pretty good. Hermione forced a smile. She had thought she could have a pleasant journey with Artel, but she didn't expect to be mixed up by her roommate. But no way, their relationship is pretty good. Hermione quickly packed up and chatted with her twin sisters. Artel played the role of the audience, and only answered a sentence or two when someone asked him. Her performance is very satisfying to Hermione. After all, it means that our test treats her differently from the twins, and it also shows that Artel has no interest in the two sisters. In the evening, the train arrived at Hogwarts. Artel and the others got out of the car. This time they were not entering Hogwarts for the first time, so instead of following the ritual of the Four Founders tour of the Black Lake, they rode the self-driving carriage to the castle. Of course, Hermione and the others couldn't see Thestrals, but Artel really saw it. This is not only because he is a necromancer, but also because he has sacrificed hundreds of lives with his own hands. After all, the destruction of the Forbidden Forest and the Troll tribes came from his means. After arriving at the castle, Artel and Hermione separated and pulled their suitcases to the underground Slytherin lounge. Although there is still the last day of vacation tomorrow, most of the little wizards have already returned to school, and they can go to class better after a day off at school. In the Slytherin lounge, many people nodded slightly when they saw Artel, and Artel responded with a smile. He and most of the Slytherin students nodded and didn't even say a word. There was no one else in the dormitory, and it was unknown whether the three Malfoy brothers had not returned or went to the auditorium. After a brief tidying up, Artel went to the auditorium for dinner. Artel, come here. Hermione was ready at the Gryffindor table, and when she saw Artel, she greeted him and sat down. After many days, Artel saw Harry again. His mood didn't look high. He felt sick, because he was going to be punished by Professor Snape and put into confinement after school started. Happy New Year, Harry, Ron. Artel offered to greet both of them. Happy New Year, Artel. The two answered in unison, and then continued to cook casually. You guys don't seem to be in good shape. Do you need any help? Artel patted the table, and an exquisite dinner appeared in front of him immediately. Artel first tasted the potato bisque and felt that the taste was not bad. The Hogwarts house elves cook better than the cooks in his family. It's nothing, just. Harry hesitated, and finally didn't tell Artel that he was caught by Professor Snape and deducted points for his night tour. But after thinking about it, he asked Artel, "Do you know Nicole LeMay?" Ron was a little taken aback, as if he hadn't expected Harry to ask Artel that question. Nicole LeMay. Artel pretended to think for a while, then nodded and said, "I know this guy, he's in Chocolate Frog's wizard card, seems to be a famous alchemist." Hermione on the side patted the table with a bang, snorted softly, raised her head, and said, "Harry, you should ask me about this. You know." Ron looked at Hermione suspiciously. Hermione glanced at him, and said to herself, "The list of famous magicians of our time records this man, Nicole LeMay, as a great alchemist who has." Hermione scratched her fingers and figured it out, but in the end she couldn't figure it out. Anyway, he is many years old, and his most well-known achievement is the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, which is a gem that can turn anything into gold. In addition to that, the Philosopher's Stone can also be used to make elixirs. Harry and Ron widened their mouths and looked at Hermione with a little admiration in their eyes. "I should have asked you earlier. If I had asked earlier, I wouldn't have." Harry was a little annoyed, knowing that he had asked Hermione earlier, so he wouldn't have to sneak into the forbidden area, and he wouldn't have been caught. "It's no use asking me earlier." Hermione turned her head to look at Artel and said with a smile, "I only read this book when I was at home during the holiday, and I didn't know if you asked me earlier." Harry and Ron looked at each other. They didn't understand why Hermione looked at Artel when she said this, and it seemed like something had happened between the two of them during the holiday. But it doesn't matter. The important thing is that they know who Nicole May is, and what the three-headed dog Mau Mau is guarding in the forbidden area on the 4th floor. Magic Stone. Snape must have tried to steal the Philosopher's Stone. He wanted to live forever. Harry muttered softly as he took a sip of the soup, gulped down the baked potatoes on the plate, then got up and ran out. Ron opened his mouth and finally looked at Artel embarrassedly and said, "He's probably just too excited. You know, this problem has been bothering him for a long time." "Never mind. Ron, how was your vacation?" Artel said he didn't care, and instead talked to Ron. "Oh, this holiday, that's all. My parents went to Romania to see Charlie, while George and Fred they could go to Hogsmeade. Harry and I had to go to the library every day to find materials," Ron said, and pursed his lips a little aggrieved. As a matter of fact, this holiday sucked. Harry was caught by Professor Snape, and a very important thing his father left him was confiscated by Professor Snape. Ron finished the drumstick quickly, stood up, and said, "I'm going to see Harry. I think he should go to Hagrid. There's something in between. I'm sorry I can't talk to you." After Ron finished speaking, he left the auditorium. Mysteriously, Shiro told them, Hermione snorted disapprovingly. "Everyone has their own secrets, and it's not good to be too curious," Artel said to Hermione, a smile on his face as he watched Ron leave. Because of Artel's intervention, Harry and Ron learned about the Philosopher's Stone nearly 2 months earlier, and he didn't know how that would affect the plot. However, in the original book, the day Harry and the three heard the news of the Philosopher's Stone happened to be the day Hagrid hatched the dragon. Now, Quirrell probably didn't give the dragon to Hagrid. Artel was going to stare at Quirrell a little more, and that dragon, Artel wanted too. At breakfast the next day, Artel found Dumbledore leaving Hogwarts. He guessed that Newt might have found something, so he called Dumbledore away. In order to confirm his guess, after eating, Artel returned to the dormitory and took out the Isel spar on the bed. Sure enough, Dumbledore and Newt were together. In addition to them, Artel also saw Lupin and several others, a member of the Order of the Phoenix. They are in the Congo Basin right now. Newt discovered the mutation of the plants in the Congo Basin the day before yesterday. After 2 days of exploration, he discovered the Balrog located in the underground river in the Congo Basin, but he just glanced at the sleeping Balrog from a distance, not stupid. Go up and test. Just from the powerful aura emanating from the Balrog, Newt knew that he was by no means an opponent. When Dumbledore got the parchment before, he asked Newt if he had seen a creature similar to the Balrog. At that time, Newt gave Dumbledore a negative answer. With such a major discovery this time, Newt immediately contacted Dumbledore, and after listening to Newt's description, Dumbledore also thought of the terrifying creature mentioned on the parchment, the Balrog. So he quickly summoned the members of the Order of the Phoenix who could be summoned, and went to Congo to investigate. Artel put away the Iselspar, and Dumbledore was not at Hogwarts, so he could take this opportunity to collect those wolf cubs in the Forbidden Forest. For various reasons, Artel couldn't do it before, but now is a perfect opportunity. So, Artel, wearing the Lord of the Rings, quietly came outside the Forbidden Forest. The barrier that was destroyed by Artel last time has been repaired by Dumbledore. Not only that, but the 2 Aurors sent by the Ministry of Magic are also guarding the Forbidden Forest entrance. But Artel was already prepared. He drank a bottle of animal medicine in an unoccupied corner, turned into a sparrow, and swaggered into the Forbidden Forest. There are a group of werewolf descendants living in the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts. They are the offspring born by a wizard with wolf-like disease and an ordinary wolf on a full moon night. Although they are beasts, they have high intelligence and are suitable for strong orc elixir. After searching in the Forbidden Forest for half an hour, Artel found this group of werewolf descendants in a cave far from Shaluo's lair. There were about 50 descendants, of which a dozen were just wolf cubs, and the rest were already adult. These werewolf descendants were much larger than ordinary wild wolves, and their appearance was more ferocious, with sharp teeth and claws, and they looked very terrifying. Artel observed it and found that their actions were orderly and they could communicate easily, so he came up with a solution. He changed into Saruman's appearance again and walked out of nothingness. Ow! The werewolf descendants issued a warning, and the adult males took the initiative to step forward and bared their fangs and claws towards Artel. Although they looked fierce, Artel found fear in their eyes. Yes, these guys recognize wizards and are terrified of wizards. Take it easy, kid. Artel waved his hand, and the scepter emitted a soft white light, soothing the emotions of these wolf cubs. I will bring you strength, honor, and new life. Artel smiled. He raised his hand, the power of the air ring activated. Under the violent fluctuation of the air element, the closest and most powerful werewolf descendant was controlled by magic, slowly floated up, and then flew away, in front of him. Woo! When the other werewolf descendants saw that their leader was being controlled, they all bowed low, revealing their sharp fangs, and threateningly whimpered from their mouths, as if they were going to pounce in the next second. Artel didn't care. He felt the struggle of the werewolf descendant controlled by magic. Calm down. The old voice contained special magic power, and the struggling leader froze suddenly, then stopped. Good boy, you will thank me, Artel whispered, and took out a bottle of strong orc potion. He used mice, rabbits and other animals to create a lot of low-level orcs at home 2 days ago, and then harvested their souls to create 10 bottles of powerful orcs potions. Counting the bottle made at school, there are 11 in total bottle. His current materials are enough to make hundreds of potions of powerful orcs, but it just takes a lot of time. After Artel took out the powerful orc potion, all the werewolf descendants went crazy. They stared at the powerful orc potion like amethyst, and the corners of their mouths were constantly drooling, as if this was some kind of unrivaled delicacy. The smell of the strong orc potion attracts every werewolf descendant, and they instinctively feel that this thing has a fatal attraction to them. The wolf floating in front of Artel let out a whimper, but it was no longer a threat, but a pleasing sound like when Artel fed Charlie beef. Artel smiled and waved his hand. Under his control, the powerful orc potion flew to its mouth, and then poured it into it. Woo! The other werewolf descendants were a little uneasy, their limbs constantly rubbing the ground. Artel untied the magical bond of the werewolf descendant leader, who fell to the ground and began to roll wildly. A deep purple magic light emerged from its body, and then formed a layer of rich purple mist, completely wrapping it. After about 5 minutes, a loud wolf howl came from the fog, and all the fog poured into its body as if it was sucked by a giant whale. When all the fog disappeared, a whole new race appeared in front of Artel and the descendants of the Forbidden Forest werewolves. This is a wolf clan strong orc. In other words, this is a new type of werewolf. Different from the werewolf in the Harry Potter world, the strong orc of the wolf clan was covered with thick long hair and looked inhuman. What a weapon of war! Artel couldn't help but sigh. Lord, Master. The strong orc glanced around, and after seeing Artel, he took the initiative to crawl on the ground. The process of making potions of strong orcs involves soul magic, so the strong orcs created will be Artel's most loyal servants. Get up. Artel looked at his masterpiece, which was a strong orc he created by himself, completely different from the summoned creature of the Lord of the Rings. Looking at this perfect artwork, Artel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. You'll be called Warwick from now on. Artel stretched out his hand and gave his first strong work of Li Jiao's name. Thanks, great host. Warwick's response was a little jerky. It wasn't quite used to speaking in human language, and it put its head under Artel's palm, wanting him to touch it. Artel touched it, feeling a little thorny. These are handed over to you. The most powerful person who bestows you is a warrior. After a while, I will bring you more potions. Artel took out the remaining 10 bottles and gave them to Warwick. After thinking about it, he ordered. Find a way to leave the Forbidden Forest, go find other werewolf descendants, expand your tribe, and I will find you when the time comes. Yes, great master. Warwick took the werewolf potion and knelt down deeply on the ground. Artel smiled with satisfaction, the scepter in his hand paused on the ground, and the whole person disappeared again. Artel knows that from now on, in the Harry Potter world, he has a group of the most loyal and also the most powerful force. The power that belongs to him alone. After the potion was distributed, 10 more wolf orcs appeared in Warwick's group. That night, under their leadership, the werewolf descendants left the Forbidden Forest where they had lived for decades, and went to work for Artel. Find more partners. Artel wasn't worried about not finding them, he just had to use the Isilhedron to locate Warwick, and then he could rush over in an instant by apparating. The next day, Hogwarts officially opened. Since it was Thursday, Artel and the others needed a potions class from Snape. Harry's face was ugly during the meal, and he could already imagine how Professor Snape would taunt him after class. Hermione didn't seem to be in high spirits, and she was still complaining about why the first class was potions. Because this is Hermione's least favorite class, even more annoying than History of Magic. After all, Professor Snape always finds excuses to deduct points from Gryffindor. Have you previewed the knowledge for this class? Professor Snape will definitely ask questions. At breakfast, Hermione asked Neville and Harry a question. Preview, it is the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and how to deal with black root grass juice, extraction of frobe caterpillar mucus. Neville folded his fingers and counted, and Harry and Ron on the side nodded. If he asks a question, we can raise our hands to answer, so he has to give us extra points. Hermione instructed. She had heard from other people that Harry Potter was deducted 50 points during the Christmas holidays. In order to make the final conclusion of the Academy Cup not too ugly, Hermione has made up her mind. Hit Professor Snape on the head. After dinner, everyone went to the dungeon to prepare for class. On the way, Hermione was talking and laughing with Artel, but after entering the classroom, Hermione was affected by the gloomy and depressing atmosphere inside. She silently closed her mouth and sat down beside Artel. Not long after all the students had arrived, Snape walked into the classroom with a serious face in a black robe. He first looked at it and made sure that no students skipped class, and then Shirin opened the textbook. Can anyone tell me? Before Snape could finish his words, Hermione raised her hand. The other students had taken it easy, even Snape, and ignored her directly. But to Snape's surprise, Harry and Ron also raised their hands. Oh, Snape frowned and looked at Harry. So, Harry, tell me what ingredients are needed for the Oblivion Potion. Harry Potter, isn't it the 12 uses of dragon's blood? Isn't that what to do with blackroot juice? Isn't that how to extract the mucus of the flobber caterpillar? What is Oblivion Potion? Ron on the side also widened his eyes, and quickly retracted his raised hand, only Hermione, still holding her hand high. Looks like you don't know. Snape looked at Harry indifferently, then sneered. Harry Potter, 5 points for your recklessness and pushiness for Gryffindor. Now, everyone, open your books, and in this lesson we're going to learn how to deal with blackroot sap. It's not fair. Hearing Snape's words, Harry clenched his fists. But he didn't dare to argue with Snape, so he could only clench his fists silently and scolded Snape a few words in his heart. After class, Snape shook his greasy hair and left like a gust of wind. The students breathed a sigh of relief before Harry and Ron started muttering bad things about Snape. Harry was happy because Snape forgot to punish him, but CGEB, his happiness didn't last long. Professor Snape, who left like the wind, floated back like the wind. He looked at Harry with an indifferent smile. Harry Potter, I don't think you've forgotten that you have to clean the prefect's bathroom for 3 days in a row. Also, if you want to get your confiscated items back, go to my office and write a review. Snape didn't actually want to give back the invisibility cloak to Harry Potter, that thing always reminded him of Harry's father, but no way, Dumbledore asked him to. According to Dumbledore, this is what James Potter left to Harry and should not be confiscated for a long time. Snape always felt that Dumbledore was hiding something from him. It seemed that he wanted Harry to do something. Snape thought about it, and decided to follow Dumbledore's arrangement. What harm did he get? I see, Professor, Harry replied glumly. Snape snorted coldly, flicked his black robe, and left again. Call. The little wizards breathed a sigh of relief. The classroom became lively again, and everyone began to pack up and prepare to leave this gloomy place. Are you going to the library in a while? After leaving the classroom, Artel asked Hermione. Yes, I promised Mrs. Pants to help her sort out some old books in the library. Because Hermione often went to the library to read books, she had become good friends with the librarian, Mrs. Pants. Last time, Dumbledore asked Madame Pants to sort out the books and see if she could find any parchment, but Madame Pants didn't. What a harvest. However, during the Christmas holidays Harry found the parchment in the forbidden area again, so Dumbledore asked Mrs. Pants to take a closer look. This time Mrs. Pants found Hermione, because she found the first parchment. What about you? What are you going to do? Artel thought about it and replied. There's nothing to do, go back to the bedroom and read a book. Did you read that Saruman's note? Hermione lowered her voice suddenly and asked in Artel's ear. She looked vigilantly at the little wizards passing by, and continued. I remember you told me before that the two magics you taught me were both found in the notebooks of a wizard named Saruman. Seeing Hermione's vigilant look, Artel couldn't help but want to laugh. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he replied. Yeah, what's wrong? What's the matter? Haven't you read the Daily Prophet the other day? Hermione's eyes widened, and then she thought that Artel might only be looking at the snow-capped mountains in Switzerland when she was on vacation, and she wouldn't have a chance to buy the Daily Prophet when she came back, so she pulled him to a corner where no one was around, and said. I also saw it in my bedroom yesterday. On Christmas Eve, the Ministry of Magic was attacked by a wizard, causing great losses. And the wizard who attacked the Ministry of Magic was Saruman. I suspect that your note is his. Hermione said, as if thinking of something, suddenly asked. By the way, where did you get your notes? I read the Daily Prophet and said that there is no record of Saruman, a wizard, and someone checked the past graduates of various magic schools, but he didn't find his name. Artel was well prepared for this, and replied calmly. I found it in Nocturne Alley. I was thinking of going to Diagon Alley to buy something, but I accidentally walked to a very chaotic place and found this note in a corner, only to find out that it was Nocturne Alley. It turned out to be that place, so it's not surprising. I heard that there are many dark wizards there, who might have left it there. That Saruman is a very powerful wizard, and even the principal is not sure to defeat him. Hermione Barbara said a lot and finally concluded. I think, you must never tell others that you have a note, and don't take it out where there are others, otherwise it will be bad if you are misunderstood. Hermione looks like I'm serious about you, and Artel smiles and squeezes her cheek. I see, to thank you for telling me such important news. How about it? Hermione's eyes widened, showing a look of anticipation. Artel leaned into her ear and whispered. I'll take you to Hogsmeade this weekend. Hogsmeade. Hermione's eyes suddenly lit up. She was a little excited, but also a little scared. But, the school rules. Don't care about those rules. Gryffindor is the college with the highest rate of night travel. There are not many good students like you. We can go to the Honeyduke candy store to buy the latest candy, go to Magic Jokes. Hermione thought about it, finally made up her mind, and nodded. Then we've settled. I'm going to find Mrs. Pants, see you at lunch. After Hermione finished speaking, she straightened her hair and ran upstairs. Artel went back to the dormitory. The three of Malfoy were also in the dormitory. When they saw Artel coming back, they greeted him. What are you talking about? Seeing that the three Malfoys were chatting, Artel couldn't help but ask. Hey, Malfoy smiled embarrassedly and replied. Let's talk about Liechtenstein. The potions store we invested in reopened in Liechtenstein, where the trolls were wiped out. There was a happy look on Malfoy's face, and Artel could tell he was really happy. You don't know how much gold galleons our family has lost because of those stupid creatures. My father has written to the International Federation of Wizards many times, but it's of no use. Now it's all right, those things have been taken solved. Goyle, who was on the side, was eating dessert, and said inarticulately. I read the newspapers too, but I don't seem to know who did it. I know a little. Malfoy showed a smug look. He peeked at Artel, saw Artel also looking at him with interest, and couldn't help but raise his chest higher. Seems like getting Artel's attention is something to be proud of. Our family employs a store manager in a potions shop in Liechtenstein, and his daughter is a staff member of the Liechtenstein Ministry of Magic, who seems to be a receptionist. I heard from my father that the woman received the wizard named Saruman on the night the troll tribe was destroyed, and then the troll tribe was wiped out. Malfoy looked at the shocked eyes of Goyle and Crabbe, and said proudly. Yes, the wizard who attacked the Ministry of Magic on Christmas Eve. Saruman of the White Council. Cannot believe it. No wonder the entire troll tribe was wiped out. It turned out to be him. But why did he attack the trolls? Goyle and Crabbe muttered to themselves. Malfoy apparently didn't know this, he just heard the news from his father. What I said to you is a secret, remember not to tell anyone. Otherwise, if you cause trouble to the great wizard and annoy him, you know what will happen. Malfoy warned Goyle and Crabbe, then gave Artel another look. I won't say it, Artel replied. Malfoy breathed a sigh of relief and continued to brag with Gower Crabbe. Artel went back to the bed and lay down, took out the Iselspar, and the picture flashed, revealing the figures of Dumbledore and others. Besides Dumbledore and Newt, there were also some very familiar faces to Artel. Like Lupin, Mad-Eye Moody, Tonks et al. At this moment, they are resting on the edge of a dry underground river. Looking at their state, it seems that they have just experienced a war. Everyone looked smoky, with black and gray faces. Even Dumbledore was the same, and his beard was burnt a lot. As this resolved, Artel's thoughts moved, and the picture on the Iselspar changed, and the huge body of the Balrog appeared. Compared with when he was just summoned, the flame burning on his body at this time was only a little smaller, and the rest was nothing, and it seemed that he did not suffer much damage. Artel guessed that Dumbledore and the others should just try it out. Maybe they didn't figure out what to do with this big guy. It looks like Dumbledore won't be back anytime soon, so everything in the school should be left to Snape and Professor McGonagall. Artel was relieved, no longer paying attention to Dumbledore and Balrog, but put his eyes on Quirrell. At this time, Quirrell had just finished his class for Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw's Little Wizards and had returned to his office. The Defense Against the Dark Arts professor's office is on the 3rd floor, on the same floor as Dumbledore's headmaster's office. Quirrell should know that Dumbledore is not at Hogwarts, so he just glanced at the entrance of the headmaster's office and closed the office door. After locking the door inside, Quirrell undid the strip of cloth over his head, revealing the silhouette of Voldemort inside. Owner. Quirrell's voice was full of fear. A sigh came from the back of his head, followed by a chilling voice. Hero, my stupid servant, I'm so disappointed in you. A little philosopher's stone, tell me, how long will it take you? Hearing Voldemort's words, Quirrell trembled in fear, and he quickly explained. Master, I'm already thinking of a way. There is a 3-headed dog guarding the entrance to the forbidden area. I have tried all kinds of methods and can't break through it. You know, if I break in hard, it will definitely alarm others. 3-headed dog, that idiot Hagrid got it. Hee hee. Voldemort's disdainful laughter echoed through the office, and after a while he said. Go to Lucius, give him a dragon egg, and trade it for that stupid dog's weakness from Hagrid's stupid mouth. I don't want you to delay any longer, Quirrell, or I would be very angry. Quirrell nodded hastily, and answered with sincerity. Yes, I will definitely work hard, Master. Just Lucius, will he give me dragon eggs? After all, he will. Tell him you are my servant. He will give you. But Voldemort's voice became quieter, as if he had consumed too much power, and he murmured. If you can't get the Philosopher's Stone for me within a month, then I'll have to rely on the blood of unicorns to keep me going. In that case, you'll need to be cursed. Quirrell almost burst into tears when he heard this. Cursing or not is not the point. The key is that you can't enter the Forbidden Forest now. There has been blocked by Dumbledore's magical barrier, and the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic are always guarding how to enter. Taking 10,000 steps back, Quirrell wouldn't dare even if he could enter. Everyone knows that a terrifying big spider appeared in the Forbidden Forest. So many Aurors didn't take advantage of it, but one was poisoned to death. And it is said that the centaur tribe was wiped out. Quirrell shook his head frantically, and he didn't dare to go to the Forbidden Forest to find a unicorn for Voldemort after killing him. Master, I will definitely get the Philosopher's Stone for you within a month. Quirrell replied with a weeping voice, and Voldemort smiled contentedly, and gradually disappeared. When Voldemort disappeared, Quirrell breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the cloth soaked in garlic juice and wrapped it around his head again. Lucius, if he can really get the dragon eggs, that idiot Hagrid doesn't have to worry, just Snape sighed. Quirrell murmured softly, walked to the mirror, patted his face, returned to his submissive look, and left the office. Are you going to look for dragon eggs in the next few days? Artel put away the Iselspar thoughtfully, then took out the second Saruman experiment notebook, and began to try to learn the spiritual magic above. Just like that, 2 days passed. It happened to be snowing heavily on Saturday, and Artel took Hermione secretly from the secret passage on the 3rd floor to the cellar of the Honeyduke candy store. The dark and airtight environment in the passage and the cellar made Hermione a little cramped, so that when the two slipped out of the cellar, Hermione's rosy face made Artel wonder for a while if he had just taken the opportunity to do something to Hermione. Why is he not impressed at all? In the Honeyduke candy store, Artel and Hermione bought a large package of the latest magic candy, enough for Hermione to eat for a few months. Under the suspicious eyes of the store manager Frome, Artel pulled Hermione away from Honeyduke. Hey, the little wizard is really, the 3rd grade and still so young. Frome gestured to his wife, who rolled her eyes and ignored him. Anyone can tell that the two little guys are at most 2nd graders, maybe even 1st graders, and they don't know how they sneaked out. However, this kind of thing should be left to the professors at Hogwarts to deal with. After coming out of the Honeyduke, Artel took Hermione to the Joko joke shop again, but Hermione was not interested in these tricks, so the two just strolled around and then went to the Hog's Head bar. The reason why I didn't go to the Three Broomsticks was because Hermione had heard from the Weasley twins that Hogwarts professors liked to go to the Three Broomsticks for a drink, and the dirty Hog's Head was rarely encountered them. The two asked for 2 glasses of butterbeer in the bar. Unfortunately, Aberforth refused on the grounds that they were too young. In the end, he just served them 2 glasses of juice, and told them to leave immediately after drinking, or else they would leave. Go to the professor at Hogwarts and complain. Although Artel wasn't worried, Hermione wasn't. After drinking 2 glasses of juice, Hermione pulled him out of here. After 2 hours of strolling in the Hogsmeade village full of universities, Artel dragged Hermione to the Shrieking Shack, and then returned to Hogwarts through the secret passage and the Beating Willow. Today was amazing. While drinking hot tea in the Great Hall, Hermione was still reminiscing about what happened today. Just going to Hogsmeade may not be a problem, but it is very exciting to avoid the seniors, prefects and professors that you know along the way. Especially when she thought of Artel holding her hand and hiding in every corner of Hogsmeade, Hermione felt an inexplicable feeling in her heart. When I get these sweets back, the Petal sisters will be very envious. Hermione thought happily, looked at Artel beside her, and said seriously. Thank you, Artel, I'm really happy today. I am also very happy. Artel said with a smile. He hasn't felt this relaxed for a long time, and to be honest, it's really good to get rid of all the baggage and relax like this every once in a while. After drinking 2 cups of hot tea, Hermione couldn't wait to share today's harvest with her roommate. Artel also returned to the dormitory, observed Quirrell on a whim, and unexpectedly found that he was meeting Lucius. The two were supposed to have a secret meeting in Nocturne Alley. Quirrell hid himself in a large cloak, and the conversation ended just as Artel watched them. Give me 2 weeks, still here in 2 weeks, and I'll give you what you want. Lucius said in a low voice, holding his cane and leaving. Quirrell waited for a while, then left in the other direction. Saturday in 2 weeks. Artel remembered the time and planned to cut the beard when the time came. He wanted to use this dragon egg to see if he could create a dragon-strong orc. Saruman's experiment notes did not contain any experiments in this regard, but Artel wanted to try it himself. Dragons are still very precious in the world of Harry Potter. Organizations that can raise dragons have great backgrounds and strong strengths, and they are very secretive. The Weasleys went to Romania to see their son who had a dragon, and couldn't even bring the other children with him. Now that there is an easy opportunity to harvest dragon eggs, Artel will not miss it. At dinner on Sunday, Artel saw Dumbledore. His state was a little sluggish and ill, and it looked like he was consuming too much mana, but Artel didn't see any signs of injury. I don't know if it's a good disguise or if it's really not hurt. After eating, Artel checked the state of the Balrog, and it was similar to what he guessed. Dumbledore did not know what method he used to seal the Balrog. They could not kill the Balrog, or the price of killing the Balrog was unbearable for them, so they finally chose the seal. About 400 or 500 meters underground, surrounded by magical enchantments. The Balrog consumes a lot of mana, so he fell into a deep sleep. But once he cultivates enough time, the Balrog will recover completely. Artel, who had come to a conclusion, relaxed. If that's the case, then let the Balrog stay there, and when Artel can fully control it, let it out. Hogwarts spent the next 2 weeks in a peaceful atmosphere. The only thing worth mentioning is that Harry retrieved his invisibility cloak from Snape, opening the myth of his own nocturnal god. Because Dumbledore brought the Mirror of Arise to Harry, Harry now has to go out every night for night tours. After learning the lesson of the last time, Harry has completely changed his strategy now. Unlike the careful use of the invisibility cloak for the first time, Harry has completely let go of himself this time. Putting on the invisibility cloak and galloping, leaving a trail of messy footsteps in the empty corridor, this was Harry's counterattack against Snape. Filch is said to have nearly suffered a heart attack from Harry the other night. It is obviously an empty corridor, but there are obvious footsteps in my ears, and a gust of wind whizzes past from time to time. It wasn't until later that Filch learned about the invisibility cloak that Harry did it. Of course Harry wouldn't admit it. No one caught him anyway, and in the end, Filch didn't care about him. Even if he heard footsteps, he didn't bother to check, because he knew he couldn't see Harry and couldn't catch him. Therefore, after 2 weeks, Harry became the first person on the Gryffindor night tour. The Weasley twins, who had dominated the list before, have now fallen to the altar. Because the live map was stolen by Artel, the Weasley twins' night tour was caught twice by Snape, and the enthusiasm of the past was gone. As for the professors, they all performed their respective duties. Although the cold wave was surging, the professors did not show the slightest in front of the students. Quirrell only waited 2 weeks to get the dragon eggs from Lucius, so he worked hard and made no mistakes during this time. After 2 weeks of cultivation, Dumbledore's complexion has recovered to a state that is visible to the naked eye. On the day he returned to Hogwarts, Dumbledore called away Snape and Professor McGonagall for a secret small meeting, of course, mainly to tell them about the Balrog. Snape and Professor McGonagall were shocked by the news, but they had no clue about it either. It's just that after so many things, even the terrifying Balrog has appeared, which makes Dumbledore have to think about what Artel said to him. The reappearance of the creatures of the last era means the beginning of the end of the era, which means the devil will be revived. To this end, after thinking about it for 2 weeks, Dumbledore secretly held a plenary meeting of the Order of the Phoenix, and told every member of the strange things in the recent period. Of course, Dumbledore chose to conceal the speciality of the Lord of the Rings. In short, after the meeting, the function of the Order of the Phoenix changed from fighting against Voldemort to organizing the recovery of the Dark Lord Sauron. At the request of Dumbledore, all members of the Order of the Phoenix launched their personal connections one after another to search for all news about Gandalf, the Hobbit, and even the Holy White Council in the wizarding world. Everything was going on in an orderly manner, and just like that, it was Saturday 2 weeks later. Today is the day that Professor Quirrell and Lucius made an appointment to retrieve the dragon's egg. After lunch, Artel sneaked into the room of requirement, and took out the isolhedron and 2 automatic stirring cauldrons. While monitoring Quirrell, he began to refine the powerful orc potion. At around 2 in the afternoon, Quirrell left Hogwarts for Hogsmeade Village, then changed into a large robe in a deserted corner, and used apparate to Nocturne Alley. Artel collected the 2 bottles of newly refined potions, put the crucible and the isol spar into the system space, and then took the Ring of Air, via, followed by an apparition. Nocturne Alley is adjacent to Diagon Alley. It is a dark magic commercial street. The wizards who come here have more or less unknown purposes, so it is very dangerous and confusing. It wasn't the first time Artel came here. The last time he came here with the Lord of the Rings and ransacked all the shops in the whole street. After Nocturne Alley was looted, many dark wizards tried their best to find him, but they didn't have any clues. I heard that there are 2 dark wizard organizations with a large number of industries in Nocturne Alley. It was the other party who did this, and the result was a heavy loss. All in all, the second time he set foot on Nocturne Alley, Artel was in a strange mood. Looking at the revitalized black magic shops on both sides of the alley, Artel wondered if he should take this opportunity to make another vote. Anyway, he still needs a lot of materials to refine the powerful orc potion. There is no need to be polite if you have wool. While Artel was looking at these shops, there were also many dark wizards looking at him. Some people's expressions are very strange. There are fears, there are temptations, and they obviously recognize his appearance. Saruman. He is definitely Saruman. There is a picture of him on the Ministry of Magic's wanted list. If you catch him, you can exchange for 1,000 gold galleons. The surrounding dark wizards murmured, but no one dared to step forward. After all, the other party is a great wizard who dares to attack the Ministry of Magic alone, and it doesn't seem to be in existence to be messed with, so no one dares to be the first bird. Artel glanced at the men, most of them in robes, unkempt and dirty looking. Like a bunch of mice living in the sewers. It seems that the life of the dark wizards is generally not very good. Artel didn't pay attention to the eyes of these people. He looked towards a hidden alley. Quirrell and Lucius were inside. After about 5 minutes, Lucius hurried out from the inside. Artel saw this and walked towards the alley. He had a face-to-face with Lucius who was leaving. Because of the business in Liechtenstein, Lucius was deeply impressed by Saruman's appearance, so he recognized him the moment he saw him. Are you Saruman? Lucius stopped, and excitement flashed in his eyes. He is very interested in Saruman's power, and he is also very interested in the Holy White Council behind Saruman. Mr. Malfoy, I know you. Artel stopped, smiled at Lucius, and continued. But now is not the time to chat. I have some things to do. If you don't mind, you can wait for me here for 2 minutes. 2 minutes is fine. After Artel finished speaking, he walked into the alley. Lucius looked at Artel's back with a puzzled expression on his face. What 2 minutes? What can you do in the alley in 2 minutes? Go to the toilet. Lucius, who did not know what to do, glanced around, and the other dark wizards who were paying attention to Artel were also very curious, and they were all looking around. After thinking about it for a while, Lucius decided to follow him, and glanced at the other dark wizards who were about to move with a warning. Lucius snorted arrogantly and walked into the alley. Just 2 steps away, Lucius realized that Artel had stopped Quirrell, who was just about to leave. Crap. As if thinking of something, Lucius' face suddenly changed. Quirina's Quirrell. Artel stood in front of Quirrell, looking at the guy who was wrapped in a black robe with only his eyes sticking out. Sir, I think you've got the wrong person. A hoarse voice came from the black robe. Artel could hear it, the panic hidden under the voice. Quirrell actually panicked. He didn't know why the murderous Saruman would recognize him. You obviously don't know him. He ran here anonymously now, to receive dragon eggs for Voldemort's great cause. Once caught, it would affect all aspects. Not to mention Voldemort's side, just the crime of smuggling dragon eggs is enough for him. No, the smell of garlic on you tells me that you are Quirrell. Artel glanced at Lucius, who was also embarrassed not far behind, stroked his scepter, and continued. Quirina's Quirrell, a brilliant wizard, was often praised by his teachers for his outstanding performance while studying at Hogwarts Ravenclaw. During his tenure as a professor of defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts, he was also famous in the British wizarding world for his solid theoretical knowledge and outstanding talent. Artel said, his voice changed. Unfortunately, after returning from the trip last year, my temperament has changed greatly. I have become timid and cowardly, and my speech is indistinct. The reason for external claims is that I encountered vampires and witches. In fact, Artel paused, and looked at Quirrell with a half-smile. He saw panic in the other's eyes and nodded with satisfaction. Artel continued. Actually, I met Voldemort in Albania. A miraculous thing happened. The outstanding Professor Quirrell was conquered by Voldemort, who can only live on rodents, and became his servant. Shut up. Quirrell roared under the black robe. He took out his wand, pointed at Artel, and asked fiercely. Who are you? Quirrell couldn't hide his horror. No one would know about these things. Except him, only Voldemort knows. Who is this Saruman? God. Me. I thought you knew me. Artel smiled silently, straightening his old body, his eyes sharpening, and he looked down at Quirrell with dignified contempt. My name is Saruman. You can call me a wise man, or a wizard in white. Relax, boy, I have no interest in you or that little thing behind your head, I need that. Artel's scepter pointed to a chest in Quirrell's hand. I want that dragon egg. Quirrell's face twisted under his black robe. He couldn't handle Hagrid without the dragon egg, he couldn't get the Philosopher's Stone if he couldn't get it, and if he couldn't get the Philosopher's Stone, he could only find a way to ban the forest. Going to the Forbidden Forest is courting death. Lucius, you betrayed the master. Quirrell immediately thought of Lucius. Because they are trading dragon eggs here today, only Lucius knows about him. What does it have to do with me? Lucius rolled his eyes. He also thought that Saruman was hired by Quirrell himself to act. Maybe he wanted to pit him for a dragon egg. Master will not let you go. Quirrell said fiercely to Lucius. He raised his wand, pointed it at Artel, and said solemnly. I don't care what purpose you have, the dragon egg can't be given to you. Now, let me go. It was a joke, handing over the dragon egg was killing him, and Quirrell naturally wouldn't agree. Although it is a pity, I have to say that you made a wrong choice. Artel sighed and said regretfully. Unexpectedly, he turned into Saruman, and the first real duel was with Quirrell. But that's fine, let him see how many pounds and tails of the talented students of Ravenclaw once weighed. However, Artel naturally won't let himself fall into a situation where he is being attacked on the back. While he was wary of Quirrell, he glanced at Lucius behind him. Lucius raised his hand hurriedly, indicating that he had no ill will, and slowly took a few steps back. He wasn't going to provoke the mysterious wizard. Although he was loyal to Voldemort, it was only because of Voldemort's power. This Saruman told the secrets of Voldemort and Quirrell in one go. It is not certain who is more terrible between him and Voldemort. Smart choice. Artel smiled. Lucius was a typical profit-oriented person, and it would be good for such a person to make good use of it. Leaving a moment to be wary of Lucius, Artel pointed his scepter at Quirrell. Stupid ants, and soon you will know how ridiculous the wizard you are so proud of. Go to hell. Quirrell saw the contempt in Artel's eyes. He knew that the other party was not talking about it, but really regarded him as an ant. Can this be tolerated? Quirrell flicked his wand, and Uncursed cast an explosion spell. A flame flew straight towards Artel. Ha ha. There was an old laugh in Artel's mouth, and with a flick of his scepter, the flames changed direction and landed on the wall beside him. With a bang, the flames exploded. A big hole was blown out in the wall. The power is not bad, it's just too slow. Artel concluded in his heart, but the movement of his hands was not slow. The scepter paused, and cast a light shield spell around his body. Hundreds of evils do not invade. Although Artel can cast spells without spells, in order to increase the power of the spells and deal with the various black magic that Quirrell may release and Lucius who may sneak attack at any time, he still chooses to recite 26 spells. What kind of magic is this? Behind him, Lucius stared at the white light on Artel's body and fell into thought. He has never seen this magic, and he doesn't know how effective it is, but it seems to be a kind of protective magic. Quirrell couldn't make a single hit, and with a flick of his wand he released a second spell. Smashing spell. The spell is shattered. If this thing hits a person, it can directly turn the opponent's body into fly ash. Bellatrix was hit with all petrochemicals first, and then was beaten to ashes by Molly Weasley. Artel's body disappeared the moment Quirrell cast the shattering charm, which hit the wall, leaving 2 deep cracks. The figure of Artel suddenly appeared behind Quirrell. I didn't see any movement from him, and suddenly there was a gust of wind in the alley, and Quirrell was blown unsteadily, and he couldn't even open his eyes. After flying out in a twisted way, it will be completely offset by an inexplicable force. Artel stood there watching Quirrell set off the fireworks with interest. As expected of the teacher of defense against the dark arts, curses, poison curses, and curses are not the same. Artel counted the magic that Quirrell had unleashed. feeling that it was almost done, so he stopped the gust of wind, and then a large number of wind blades, ice knives, fire bullets and earth thorns suddenly appeared in the void, stabbing at Quirrell desperately. This is the power of Vaya, the Ring of Air. Those who wield the Vaya are instantly proficient in all elemental magic. Elemental magic is somewhat different from most of the magic in the native world of Harry Potter, but if you count it, spells such as Fiery Fire Spell, Whirlwind Spell, and Flying Sand and Stone Spell can also be included. Therefore, although Quirrell and Lucius had never seen these magics, they didn't find it abrupt. Quirrell's black robe was cut open by wind blades and ice knives, along with his skin. Blood splattered. The pain and blood made Quirrell feel the threat of death, and he couldn't care less, rolled on the ground, turned into a black mist and hid to the other side, and then raised his wand to cast armor around his body. But he was obviously thinking too much. Quirrell's tattered robe suddenly turned into vines, and these vines seemed to come alive, like pythons, which turned Quirrell into a zongzi. It wasn't over yet. The ground under Quirrell's feet suddenly turned into a water pool, and Quirrell, who was wrapped into a mummy, fell directly into it, and then the pool turned into a whole stone, revealing only half of Quirrell's head. Artel walked slowly in front of him and looked at him condescendingly. His eyes were full of pity. It's been said long ago that you will pay for your ignorance. Artel looked at Quirrell with a terrified face. He stretched out his hand, and the box scattered on the other side flew into his hand. Feeling the surging vitality of the dragon eggs in the box, Artel nodded in satisfaction and turned to look at Lucius. Mr. Malfoy, I thought you might like to buy me a cup of tea. Hearing Artel talking to him, he recovered from the shock. He read in the newspaper before that Dumbledore thought that Saruman's transfiguration was already more powerful than himself, and Lucius also thought that Dumbledore was being modest. It now appears that this is very likely to be true. The entire fight was a delight to watch, and Saruman was completely teasing Quirrell. The use of those transfigurations is simply reaching the pinnacle. If I could, of course I would. Lucius replied quickly. He glanced at the white light slowly disappearing from Artel's body, and couldn't help but admire Artel's vigilance. Obviously so powerful, yet so cautious, really. Mr. Saruman. What does he do? Lucius glanced at Quirrell, who was trapped in the big rock. Quirrell seemed to be in a very bad state, half dead. Artel was silent for a moment. He was wondering what he would gain by killing Quirrell himself. After thinking about it, it doesn't seem to be there. I have no interest in killing him, and I teach him a lesson just to let him know what it means to respect the old man. Artel glanced at Quirrell. Voldemort was still behind the guy's head, and Artel needed Voldemort to come out once in a while to look away. Although Dumbledore has regarded Sauron as a new target, Voldemort is after all his great enemy in the second half of his life, and there may be some unexpected gains when he stays. Your kindness is astounding. Lucius gave a little flattery. As for the dragon egg in Artel's hand, he has no idea. And the dragon egg was lost by you, Quirrell. What does it have to do with me, Lucius? Even if Voldemort looked for it, he couldn't find it on his head. Lucius pointed at Quirrell and smiled embarrassedly. Please go ahead. After Artel finished speaking, he lifted his legs and walked towards the entrance of the alley. In fact, the magic that he just casted was still quite expensive for him, especially the transfiguration, which consumed a lot more magic power than ordinary magic. But Artel was just trying it out. He really wanted to deal with Quirrell. He had 10,000 ways to do it. After Artel left, Lucius walked up to Quirrell, who sighed, but didn't taunt him. I didn't know him before. Believe it or not, I'm always loyal to the master. After Lucius finished speaking, regardless of whether Quirrell believed it or not, the silver cane in his hand pointed at Quirrell, and he cast a spell to end, releasing the transfiguration that bound Quirrell. After the vines wrapped around Quirrell's body turned into rags again, Quirrell took a deep breath, like a drowning man who had just been rescued ashore. Dragon egg, Quirrell said inarticulately. Stop the dragon egg. You still dare to snatch it? You have already realized the strength of Saruman. I won't go anyway. Lucius muttered. Quirrell stretched out his hand and grabbed Lucius tightly, and after a while, he said, I mean, you get me another dragon egg. This is the master's order. Lucius looked at Quirrell, suddenly regretful. He'd rather plead with Saruman on Quirrell's behalf. This thing is smuggled, and every time you get a dragon egg out, it will cost a lot of money. But thinking of Voldemort's horror, Lucius sighed and said, Okay, I'll think of a way to give me another half a month. At the entrance of the alley, Artel's ears moved, undoing a little eavesdropping magic he had left behind. After half a month, he. After a while, Lucius came out of the alley, looked at Artel apologetically, and said, I kept you waiting. It's okay, I also need some time to think about something. Artel waved his hand, and Lucius pointed in one direction and said, That is our family's shop. If you don't mind, let's go have a cup of tea. Artel glanced at it, feeling a little surprised. The last time he ransacked Nocturne Alley, this potion material store provided the most good things, but he didn't expect it to be the property of the Malfoy family. The two walked into the store. Lucius had a few words with the wizard in charge of watching the store, and then took Artel upstairs in person. There is a secret box upstairs, which seems to be used by Lucius when he talks about business with people. The two walked in and sat down, and a woman came upstairs with a pot of tea. After she went out, Lucius poured Artel a cup of tea and asked, Mr. Saruman asked me for something to talk about. There are indeed some things that I want to cooperate with Mr. Malfoy. After all, the Malfoy family is an ancient family with great influence in the wizarding world. Hearing Artel say this, Lucius laughed happily. Even more recognition for Artel. The strength of the Malfoy family is of course needless to say, so Mr. Saruman, how do you want to cooperate? I think Mr. Malfoy can help me collect some materials through family channels and contacts. Of course, the price is not a problem. With all the potion materials Artel has now, he can only make a few hundred bottles of powerful orc potions, which is far from 5,000, and it is not a long-term solution to looting Nocturne Alley, so it is better to let Malfoy help do it yourself. As for the money, he has it. The looting of Nocturne Alley allowed him to gain a lot of wealth. If these were used up, it would be a big deal to loot Gringotts again. Anyway, with the Lord of the Rings, Gringotts' defense was like a blank slate to him. Potion materials. Our family's business happens to involve. I don't know what Mr. Saruman needs. The Malfoy family has many smuggling channels, and the smuggling of potion materials is also the bulk of them. Artel asked for paper and pen, changed his handwriting on purpose, and wrote the materials for the common orc potion, strong orc potion, invisibility potion, animal potion, and the 2 soul potions recorded in the second notebook. Seeing so many precious and rare materials, Lucius also secretly clicked his tongue. No wonder Saruman needs to find him. Even if he wants to collect all these things, it will probably take a few years. After all, the quantity needed is too large, and the stock is too small, and many countries have strict control over such materials. I'll try my best. Malfoy didn't finish his sentence. Artel knew how difficult it was, and with a wave of his hand, a box appeared out of nowhere. Artel gave Lucius a deep look, and there was a hint of warning in his eyes. This is the deposit. Collect it for me as soon as possible. I will come back to you when the time comes. Mr. Malfoy, I hope we have a good cooperation. Lucius laughed dryly and nodded. Naturally, I think our cooperation will be very pleasant. Goodbye, no need to send. Artel waved his hand and got up to leave. After he left, Lucius opened the box beside him. It is full of golden galleons, about 10,000. However, Lucius did not show any joy. He stood up, looked out the window through the window, and sighed slightly after a long time. Quirrell found him and told him that Voldemort was still alive and that the king was about to return. Saruman was born, behind which there is a mysterious force, the Holy White Council. In front of these powerful people, what is the Malfoy family worth? After Artel left Malfoy's shop, he wandered around Nocturne Alley and determined that there was nothing worthwhile to start with, used apparition to return to the Screaming Shack, and then returned to Hogwarts through the dark passage. The school was calm, no one knew he had left, and no one knew what he had done. After dinner, Artel said goodbye to Hermione, returned to the dormitory, lay in bed and began to summarize what happened today. The dragon egg has been successfully obtained, but Artel is in no hurry to hatch it. He plans to use other magical animals to experiment first, and then try to create a dragon-strong orc. Before that, this dragon egg would stay in his system space. And then there's the fight with Quirrell. To be honest, Artel felt he won too easily. Although the original Rigelow's death method is also very funny, because he touched Harry Potter, he was killed by the magic of love left by Harry's mother. But despite this, it is undeniable that Quirrell's strength is still very strong. Before he met Voldemort, Quirrell was well known in the wizarding world, otherwise Dumbledore wouldn't have thought of inviting him to be the teacher of defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts. You must know that because of being cursed by Voldemort, every defense against the dark arts teacher that Dumbledore finds is capable. Even Gilderoy Lockhart. This one has practiced the Oblivion spell to an unprecedented level. You must know that many of Lockhart's autobiographical books are real events that happened to other wizards. It is because of these things that the entire wizarding world believes that Lockhart he is a great wizard with ability, and even treats him as an idol. In order to avoid being discovered, he used the Oblivion spell to make the wizards forget these things completely. Don't forget, how could the wizards with those deeds be simple characters, but Lockhart solved them perfectly by relying on the Oblivion curse. Artel even suspects that Lockhart's original strength is very strong, just because he has trained the forgetting spell so strong that he has forgotten other spells. So, in any case, Quirrell must be capable. But Artel dealt with him very easily. Artel concluded that the reason he won easily was because he knew all about Quirrell's magic, but Quirrell didn't understand his magic. The second is because of transfiguration. As Artel believes, transfiguration can play a vital role in the duel of high wizards. And Artel, who owns the Ring of Air, has undoubtedly mastered the terrifying branch of transfiguration. In general, my strength should be very strong. Even if I can't beat Dumbledore, it's just a lack of experience and magic power. Make up for these 2 points, Dumbledore will not be my opponent. Artel is very satisfied, but he also knows that all this is brought to him by Via's ring. If only by himself, he still has a long way to go, but with the system, he will shorten this road infinitely. One day, without any props, Artel can make everyone fear. That guy Quirrell was beaten up by me and lost his dragon egg. I don't know what will happen. Artel didn't see Professor Quirrell at dinner, nor did he hear other classmates talking about Professor Quirrell, so he guessed that he might not have returned to Hogwarts. After all, tomorrow is Sunday, and there is no need for class, so he may be outside recuperating. I've told Dumbledore Quirrell has a problem, but he hasn't dealt with it, and if I guess right, he's taking this opportunity to exorcise Harry Potter. Besides, a more powerful enemy has appeared, then Dumbledore may also consider the possibility of joining forces with Voldemort in the future. In this case, let them go first, just to take advantage of this time to refine some more potions. Saruman's world acceptance has been qualified, and then Gandalf and Soren's. Artel pondered, and began to plan his next goal. It's unreliable to become Gandalf, because Gandalf's character is there. Saruman's character is a hypocrite and a traitor, so Artel uses his identity to do bad things and pretend to be a good person, no problem. But Gandalf's character is a hero, a wise man, a kind-hearted melee mage. If Artel uses Gandalf's identity to mess around and make everyone think that Gandalf is a bad person, it may also be affected by the incompatibility of the characters, world acceptance. Therefore, it is better to continue the previous plan and let Gandalf become a legend recorded in the book, and his deeds can also be spread out in the form of records. As for Sauron, this guy is a big devil, but his character. Soren's soul is left, his magic eye is watching Mordor, and he is still waiting for resurrection. It is impossible to do it himself. To set up this person, Artel still needs a lot of subordinates, so he has to return to the refining force. Orc potion, build your own forces in this regard. When the parchment from Quirrell's place is found, Dumbledore will know from Gandalf that someone has betrayed them. With Dumbledore's wisdom, Saruman should be suspected, but he won't be sure, so he will look for more clues. Artel opens his own system store, and he needs to find something to serve as a clue to make Gandalf's story more real. Gandalf, Gandalf, I have worked so hard for you. Artel muttered, and quickly browsed the items in the system mall. When he saw one of them, Artel's eyes lit up. Perfect prop. That's it. Looking at the price of 300 plot points in the system mall, Artel gritted his teeth and chose to exchange. Ding. Congratulations to the host for successfully redeeming the item Monument of the Holy White Council. A stone tablet appeared in front of Artel. It was not large, only half the height of a person. It was engraved with some names, all of which were the names of the members who participated in the first meeting of the Third Era. At this meeting, Gandalf declined everyone's request for him to be the leader, so the position of leader fell to Saruman. Saruman was also jealous because of this, which paved the way for the later betrayal. Of course, these things are not recorded on the stele. The front of the stele is engraved with the names of Saruman, Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond and other members, and the back is the time and minutes of the meeting. It is roughly written that in 2460 of the Third Era, Sauron returned and the border warning ended peacefully. Therefore, a White Dao meeting of the Third Era Li Jiaohao was held to discuss how to deal with Sauron and choose a leader. This stele is real. It was built by Elrond, the Lord of the Valley. After thousands of years of vicissitudes and changes, it is full of the precipitation of time and the traces of time. In addition, there is magic in the stone tablet, and once activated by magic, it will reflect the scene of the meeting at that time. The most important thing is that there is a magic breath of each participating member. It's useless, but it's the best proof they've ever existed. Artel stroked the stone tablet, feeling the breath and power inside. He took out his wand, put on the ring of breath, and pointed at Saruman's name on it. The wand moved slowly. After a crackling sound, a ferocious scratch appeared on Saruman's name. That means, betrayer. Just a scratch made Artel consume a lot of magic power and broke out in a cold sweat. What material is this made of? It's hard to die. Artel muttered, and took the ring of air and the stone tablet back into the system space. This thing, he has to think carefully about where to put it, and how to be, smartly, discovered by other wizards. The next day is Sunday. Young wizards above the 3rd grade can play in Hogsmeade, so the school will be a bit quieter than usual. After breakfast, Artel and Hermione left the castle and walked aimlessly by the Black Lake. Not far away, there are some senior wizard couples holding hands, behaving intimately, occasionally approaching their heads and whispering, and then chasing and fighting. Hermione looked at them, pursed her lips, and glanced at Artel. What's wrong? Artel didn't know why, but felt that Hermione's expression seemed somewhat resentful. It's okay, I just want to grow up quickly. Hermione whispered. She stopped by the lake, and looked at the sparkling golden lake. Artel stood beside her, didn't speak, just looked at her quietly. I have to say that Hermione's profile is really good looking, and her long golden brown hair is messy in the wind, which makes people feel an inexplicable desire for protection. I think I'm crazy. Artel thought silently in his heart. He turned his head, also looked at the silent Black Lake, and asked. You don't seem to be in a high mood. I found out when I was eating. What happened? Hermione opened her mouth hesitantly, sighed, and decided to tell the truth. She turned around and looked at Artel seriously. I heard from Lavender that she gave you a wizard's robe for Christmas, and you liked it. Artest looked at Hermione suspiciously, and then understood. It must be that little fool of Lavender Brown who said something in front of Hermione. This woman loves to confuse right and wrong, and he has never spoken to her. But then Artel reacted, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth unconsciously. What are you laughing at? Hermione pretended to look at Artel fiercely, but her eyes clearly showed her guilty conscience at the moment. Hermione, are you jealous? Artel looked at her playfully. Hermione's face turned red. She didn't dare to look at Artel, and turned around quickly. I didn't. You haven't answered my question yet. All right. Artel smiled, and he changed his voice and asked. Did that roommate of yours tell you that? I love her gift. Well, she didn't say it herself, but that's what she meant. Hermione thought for a while, and answered unnaturally. Artel understood that Lavender Brown must have said something ambiguous that misunderstood Hermione, saying that it was a trick that Green Tea mastered, but she didn't expect to learn it by herself when she was only 11 years old. She's not entirely right. To be precise, it should be that Artel's dog Charlie likes the Christmas present she gave her. Of course, to simplify it, it's okay to say that Artel likes it. Hearing Artel say this, Hermione burst out laughing. She tapped Artel's shoulder lightly, and said with a smile. You're so annoying, how can you be so joking? I'm not kidding, don't you remember? At Shelby Manor, we went to feed Charlie, the Doberman Pinscher, and he had 2 blankets in his den, one of which was a wizard robe from Miss Brown. This. Now it was Hermione's turn to be surprised, and she recalled it carefully, as if it had happened. There were indeed 2 brand new blankets in Charlie's kennel. At that time, she felt that the style was a little familiar. Now that she thought about it, wasn't it the wizard's robe after cutting it? You actually took her present. Hermione looked at Artel oddly, but laughed immediately. That's a good idea, but why 2? The other one is also a wizard's robe, sent by Pansy Parkinson. Maybe I want to apologize to me, but unfortunately, I don't wear the clothes sent by other girls. Artel winked at Hermione and whispered. Except yours. Hermione snorted softly, with a faint smile on her face. Her whole person was much brighter, much better than when she ate. I don't give anything that others have given me. Hermione gave Artel a delighted look, pulled his sleeve, and walked in the direction of the castle. This is going back. Otherwise, it's so cold outside, why don't you go to the library to read? Hermione answered naturally. Artel understood. It seemed that Hermione couldn't read the book because of Lavender's preoccupation with the gift. So I've become a tool man. Artel let out a helpless laugh, and he reached out and stroked Hermione's hair dotingly. Hey, messed up my hair. Hermione snorted, but didn't stop her, dragged Artel into the castle, and as soon as she came in, she saw Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall, good morning. Oh, good morning, Artel, Hermione. Did you just get back from outside? Professor McGonagall was accustomed to the situation of 2 people going in and out, and she thought that Artel and Hermione were good children, so there should be no major problems. Yes, Professor, are you going out? Well, I'm going to see a friend in Hogsmeade and have a nice weekend. Mag nodded with a smile and left the castle. Artel thoughtfully watched Professor McGonagall leave. What old friend did she go to see? Maybe it was the Order of the Phoenix. However, Artel didn't think much about it. At this stage, no matter what the Order of the Phoenix did, it wouldn't affect him. Am I going to the library? Going upstairs, Hermione suddenly felt a little reluctant. She pursed her lips, hesitated for a moment, and said with a blushing face. Would you like me to accompany you again? Accompany me? What do you do with me? Artel put his face close. Hermione held her breath, didn't say a word for a long time, then stomped her feet shyly. CGEB gave Artel a white look. Have lunch with you. Humph, I'll go first. Hermione turned and went to the library. No matter how Artel looked at her, she felt like she was running away. Waiting for you in the Great Hall at noon. Artel shouted, and the other little wizards on the floor looked at him. Artel glanced at them and smiled apologetically. A professor not far away saw it and nodded with satisfaction. The principal said, well, Artel is such a polite and good boy. With more than 3 hours to go before lunch, Artel plans to go back to his bedroom. As soon as she walked to the basement, she saw Pansy at the entrance of the stairs, leaning against the wall on one side, as if waiting for someone. Seeing Artel, Pansy's expression changed a bit, and he said as if he didn't care. Yo, the genius of Slytherin, is this the little girlfriend who just finished with your lion house? Artel ignored her and walked over without looking away. Hey, Pansy stomped angrily and chased after him. Aren't you the most polite? I'm talking to you. Artel stopped and looked at Pansy with a scrutiny in his eyes. Pansy was a little guilty when she saw it, and said, biting herself. You, what are you doing? Why are you looking at me like this? Just say it well, what are you doing yin and yang? Don't use your pure blood supremacy theory on me, Miss Parkinson, I warned you. Don't provoke me again. Pansy's eyes were a little red when she heard this, and she felt a little wronged, but she still explained. That's not what I meant. At that time, I was wrong about that, and I apologized to you. I thought we could be friends. I even gave you a Christmas present. If you feel wronged, I think these can be deducted from your gift. Artel put his hand into the wizard's robe, and then took out a bag of gold galleons from the system space, which looked like 200, which was equivalent to the wizard's robe sent by Pansy. He threw the bag to Pansy and said, Miss Parkinson, don't make your own decisions in the future, it will cause trouble to others. After all, there seems to be no relationship between us. If you want to be friends with me, first change your attitude of superiority. Pansy didn't speak. She held the bag tightly, her fingers turning white. High up, I'm humble enough. Don't you see how I feel about other half-bloods and muggle wizards? I don't even bother to look at them. Pansy was silent, and Artel turned to leave. Seeing that Artel was about to leave, Pansy gritted her teeth and shouted. I don't understand how I'm worse than her. I can do what she can. I can do what she can't. Artel's footsteps didn't stop at all, as if he hadn't heard him at all. On the other hand, other students passing by in the basement looked at Pansy in surprise, but didn't quite understand what she meant. Look at what? Pansy glared at those people, glanced at the gin galleon bag in his hand, and clenched his fists. Wait, you'll know, I'm better than that mud. I'm so much better than that muggle wizard. Pansy muttered and turned away from the basement. She's going to the library to read. What Hermione can do, she can do, it's not just talking. Psychopath, isn't it? Hermione, you can touch porcelain. How are you worse than her? Your eyes are out of breath. Where does the confidence come from? Artel was in a hurry, and if Pansy got caught up in it, something might happen in the future. Malfoy couldn't even look at that girl, how could he look at her? Of course, Pansy is actually quite beautiful, but her character is too bad. Because she was born in the 28th pure blood family, she was instilled by her parents with the concept of pure blood supremacy since she was a child, so she has a domineering and arrogant personality. Artel annoys such people the most. After entering the Slytherin lounge, Artel breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the crazy woman hadn't followed. After nodding with several seniors in the lounge, Artel returned to his dormitory. Only Goyle was in the bedroom, and he was fighting a lot of desserts at this time. Malfoy and Crabbe didn't know what to do. Where are the two of them? Artel asked. These three people are usually inseparable, why is there only one left in the bedroom now? Oh, Malfoy said something was wrong with Harry lately, so he and Crabbe were staring. Gore smiled a little embarrassedly, pointed to his feet and said. I fell and twisted my foot when I went downstairs, so I went back to rest. Artel looked at Goyle speechlessly, gave him a thumbs up. Goyle smiled embarrassedly, glanced at the dessert on the table, and motioned to Altair. Would you like to come and eat some? Forget it, I'm full. Artel rolled his eyes speechlessly, returned to the bed, and took out the second Saruman's experiment notes. Because of the bonus of Soren's necromancer talent, the first Saruman's experimental notebook has basically been thoroughly understood by Artel. Apart from him, I am afraid that only Snape can do this in a short time. The second lab notebook is a bit more difficult, of course, for Artel. After all, Soren's talent is extraordinary. In addition to his powerful magic talent, Sauron is also a genius in alchemy. It must be known that the Supreme Lord of the Rings was created by Sauron. Soul medicine that confuse memory fragments. Artel is researching a special potion recorded in his lab notebook. According to Saruman's experimental data, this potion can integrate a memory fragment into another person's mind and make him firmly believe that it is his memory. Maybe it could be used too. Artel has some ideas in his mind, but the materials needed for this potion are more precious. There are many things Artel has never heard of, but he recorded the materials needed on the list for Lucius, and he doesn't know when I can get it together. In this way, Artel spent the whole morning reading in his bedroom. At noon, Artel came to lunch in the Great Hall, where Hermione was already waiting for him. It's here. Hermione waved at Artel. Artel walked over and sat down, took a picture of the table, and a sumptuous lunch appeared in front of him. Artel, I think that Pansy. Hermione moved closer to Artel and whispered. She was in the library today, staring at me, and smiling at me defiantly, and I feel like she's still trying to trouble me. Artel frowned. The woman was not pestering herself, she was running to pester Hermione. What does she want to do? Can I help you teach her a lesson? Need not. Hermione rejected Artel, and she could vaguely guess why, but she wasn't quite sure. After all, she hasn't done anything yet. I'll do this myself. I'm not afraid of her. The main reason for telling you is that I'm afraid. If she is your friend now, I'm afraid you will be angry. Artel gave Hermione a surprised look. Is this a tea? I have nothing to do with her. Artel looked at Hermione with a half smile. Hermione realized that Artel had seen through her own thoughts, stuck out her tongue in embarrassment, and smiled embarrassedly. Hey, then I'm really welcome. If she dares to provoke me, I'll let her know how powerful it is. Hermione raised the fork in her hand, and her eyes flashed with excitement. In fact, she had wanted to teach Pansy a lesson for a long time. She had discovered many times that when she and Artel were eating, Pansy always stared at them with strange eyes, and often peeked at Artel during class. She ignored it before, but now this woman took the initiative to go to the library to provoke her, which is simply too bullying. What's more, this woman might be trying to steal Artel, so Hermione couldn't bear it. Alright, you are all girls, you are more appropriate than me to teach her a lesson. Artel didn't care either. Hermione learned 2 Saruman spells from him, and after listening to his advice, she took time to practice every week, and she would definitely not suffer against a 1-year-old pansy. The two were eating, and Harry and Ron rushed into the auditorium and sat down opposite them. Goo-doo-doo. Ron, gasping for breath, drank a large glass of juice, and let out a long sigh of relief. Ron, Harry, what's the matter with you? Neville, who was eating silently next to him, asked. Neville and Harry are roommates and have always had a good relationship. No, it's fine. Harry shook his head and didn't say anything. Neville gave him a dull look and didn't ask any more questions. Ron looked at him hesitantly, then at Harry, and finally leaned forward and said in a low voice. We just went to the 4th floor. 4th floor. Hermione was naturally very sensitive to this deduction of 50 points from her. She raised her head sharply and looked at Harry and Ron. Why and where did you go? Gryffindor will be a laughingstock again if you get caught. No, not what you think. Harry explained. He glanced at the door of the Great Hall, didn't find Snape's figure, and breathed a sigh of relief. We saw Snape and he sneaked up to the 4th floor, so we followed. I swear, it's really Professor Snape, and he's trying to steal. You know, that thing. Ron added immediately. Originally this weekend, Harry and Ron planned to have a good day off, but when they were playing outside, they found that Snape was mysterious and didn't look like he was going to do a good job. So the two followed, and finally found that Snape was a little strange. He first sneaked into Professor Quirrell's office, then chatted with Hagrid, and finally went to the headmaster's office and found Dumbledore not there, so he went to the 4th floor. Harry and Ron kept following secretly, but after reaching the 4th floor, Ron accidentally made some noises, which disturbed Snape, and ran back in a panic because he was afraid of being caught by Snape. After Ron finished speaking, Professor Snape came to the auditorium. He silently walked behind Harry and Ron, stared at them a few times, and then left with a flick of his robe. I think he must have found out. Ron's face was a little ugly, and Artel was curious about how an 11-year-old boy had so many folds on his face. It's okay, he has no evidence. Harry didn't care. He had already trained, and he relied on the invisibility cloak to go around without a trace these days, which made Filch annoyed, but because there was no evidence, he had been unable to punish Harry. Perhaps Professor Snape just wanted to check. More. Neville on the side whispered something. You don't understand, Neville, there's definitely something wrong with Professor Snape. He was bitten by that big dog on Halloween. I think he couldn't hold back. Neville stopped talking. He felt that it was a little bad. Although Snape was always targeting Gryffindor, as his student, Neville felt that he should not be so suspicious of his professor. Harry and Ron did not continue the topic. They looked at each other and sighed. Both of them felt a kind of loneliness where everyone was drunk and I was alone. However, heroes are all alone and not understood. Harry cheered himself up in his heart. He was the famous Harry Potter. He would definitely stop Snape and expose his conspiracy. The atmosphere at the dinner table was a bit depressing, but fortunately it didn't last long because the owl in charge of delivering the letter came. Weasley's owl brought Ron a copy of the Daily Prophet, which he opened and found nothing worth discussing. Ron put down the newspaper regretfully and muttered, "What a pity, I thought the wizard who attacked the Ministry of Magic would be caught." George, who was not far away, sat over, put his arms around Ron's neck, and said carelessly, "You mean Saruman? I don't think it's possible. He is a wizard who is more powerful than Headmaster Dumbledore. This is the headmaster's own admission." Fred appeared out of nowhere. He picked up the newspaper and echoed, "That's right, Saruman is our idol now. Wreak havoc at the Ministry of Magic on Christmas Eve and put his name on the Magic Brothers sculpture. What a great idea. If you learn from him, Dad won't let you go," Ron said dryly, and the Weasleys quarreled with the crowd for a while, and left the auditorium laughing. Shortly after they left, Artel found that Professor Quirrell had also come to the auditorium. There were no obvious wounds on his face, but he looked half dead. Artel suspected that he might have been punished by Voldemort. It's pretty pathetic too. Artel looked at Quirrell's unlovable look, suppressed a smile, ate the last piece of roast meat, and left with Hermione. The next few days of study and life were relatively boring, but fortunately, the Quidditch Cup competition in the academy became more and more intense. When it was boring, Artel and Hermione went to the game. Listening to the hysterical shouts of the little wizards around, and Hermione's elated look when Gryffindor scored, Artel once thought that life was still sweet. In this way, another half-month passed. This weekend, the agreed time has come again. Quirrell carefully took the dragon egg from Lucius, and before he even had time to say goodbye to Lucius, he apparated out of Nocturne Alley. Lucius twitched the corners of his mouth, looked around, but did not see Saruman. Look at you, Nyen. Lucius snorted and swaggered away. Quirrell appeared in Hogsmeade. After he stabilized, Quirrell went straight to the Pig's Head bar without any hesitation. He has been observing Hagrid these days, and found that he goes to the Pig's Head bar every weekend to drink, so Quirrell, who got the dragon egg, chose to go directly to Hagrid in order to prevent the dragon egg from being robbed again. He obviously didn't expect it, though, and Artel knew exactly what he meant. The Pig's Head bar is at the intersection of a small road in Hogsmeade Village. Quirrell was hiding under a large black robe, holding a dragon egg in his hand. Just as he turned a corner, he saw a familiar face in front of him. Long white hair, gray beard, intelligent eyes, serious face and a noble scepter. Mr. Quirrell, we met. Artel didn't talk nonsense, and directly extended his hand. Dragon egg, bring it to you. Sean. Chapter 91. Saw. Mr. Saruman. Quirrell's voice sounded like a wounded dog whimpering. He glanced around anxiously and said pleadingly, Great wise man, honorable Mr. Saruman, this is my last dragon egg. Without this dragon egg, I will die. I will really die. Quirrell couldn't stop begging. His only two eyes were full of despair, fear and puzzlement. He didn't know why. Obviously he was very careful. He didn't even tell Lucius where his destination was. Why is Saruman waiting for him here in advance? Quirrell thought of the last time he saw Saruman, the way he told all of his secrets unhurriedly. The wise. The gods, even the master can't do it. Quirrell's fear of Saruman reached its peak at this moment, and he trembled and prayed. The opponent is so powerful, and he can't get any dragon eggs he wants, so why do they have to rob him? If he is a little humbler, and a little more humble, will he let him go? Don't be nervous, kid. 577. Artel played a kindly old man at this point, reaching out and stroking Quirrell's head. It's like the owner is comforting his pet. I know what you want. A stupid dog with 3 heads is blocking your way. Give me the dragon egg, and I will tell you how to subdue it. You. Are you telling the truth? Hearing Artel's words, Quirrell looked up in shock. The despair and unwillingness in his eyes turned into an unspeakable surprise in an instant. I never deceive anyone, Artel said unhurriedly. He turned his palm, and a music box suddenly appeared in his hand. It was bought at a souvenir shop in Switzerland during his winter break. This thing will help you, and the soothing music puts that 3-headed dog to sleep. Quirrell took the music box carefully. He looked at Artel, looked at his gouging Wubo's eyes, and finally chose to believe. Saruman, he didn't have to lie to me. Yes, he didn't have to lie to me. With that in mind, Quirrell respectfully handed the dragon egg to Saruman. Good luck, my boy. Artel took the dragon egg and was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something, so he stopped and looked Quirrell up and down. Do you have anything else to do? Quirrell looked at Artel cautiously, a little afraid that he would suddenly regret it if he beat himself again. The wounds from the last time have not healed yet, and now my body is still aching. Your master, Tom Riddle, well, Voldemort, tell him I want a serpent called Nagini, and I can help him get the Philosopher's Stone. Quirrell hesitated, and a bottle of potion like a thick mist appeared in Artel's hand. This is an invisibility potion, a gadget I made at random. Drink it and you can be invisible for half an hour. The effect is better than wearing an invisibility cloak. I think it should be of great help for you to steal the magic stone. Quirrell's eyes widened, staring at the potion in Artel's hand like a rare treasure. Invisible potion. Simply incredible. Quirrell had never even heard of it. In addition to using an invisibility cloak, wizards who want to be invisible can also cast a disillusionment spell. However, the illusion spell is a very clever spell. Its inspiration comes from the chameleon. After using the spell, the wizard will integrate himself into the surrounding environment, so as to achieve the effect of invisibility. But it's not easy to achieve perfect stealth, especially in places with monotonous colors. It's easy to make people feel awkward. What's more, in most places, there are decanters for illusory body spells, which leads to the fact that the actual application of illusory body spells requires the right timing. If there is a potion that can make me invisible. Quirrell shivered with excitement. With this potion and the three-headed dog, Quirrell can steal the Philosopher's Stone tonight. Promise him. Quirrell's voice echoed in Quirrell's mind. In fact, Voldemort was full of curiosity about this sudden appearance of Saruman. He originally planned to wait for his resurrection to study how to contact Saruman, but he did not expect that the other party would take the initiative to find him. Voldemort didn't know what Saruman wanted Nagini to do. But Nagini, as his Horcrux, can share his vision and consciousness with Voldemort, and Voldemort collects intelligence entirely through Nagini. Then find an opportunity to control Nagini back to his side. As for whether Saruman will destroy Nagini, Voldemort thinks it is unlikely that he could destroy Nagini with such a precious potion. Somewhat wrong. Yes, master. Quirrell raised his head quickly, looked at Artel, and said. My master agreed. Smart choice. Artel threw the potion into Quirrell's hand. Quirrell hurriedly put it away, then looked at Artel and held out a hand. Nagini in the mountains of Romania. Artel put his hand on his robe, the two of them apparated, and the next second, they appeared in Romania in Eastern Europe. The two stood in a dense forest in a mountain area. Quirrell glanced at Artest, took off his black robe, and then took off his turban. Well, Voldemort's face squeezed out of Quirrell's bare back of head. He opened his eyes, first glanced at Artel, and found that Artel was also looking at him with pity in his eyes. Voldemort didn't know the identity of Saruman at this time, but he still regarded the other party as a character like Dumbledore. Although the other party's eyes made him very uncomfortable, Voldemort still made a permeating laugh. Saruman, mister, I'm looking forward to our future cooperation. Voldemort spoke intermittently, and Artel was afraid that he wouldn't catch his breath and went straight to it. After dawdling for a long time, Voldemort finally finished speaking. He turned Quirrell around, facing the jungle, and said Parseltongue. Out. The strange tone came out far away, and after about 5 minutes, a rustling sound came out, and a huge viper appeared in front of Artel. It's Nagini. Artel is also a little excited. He wants Nagini, and naturally he has his own plans. The Aria of Light has a high probability of curing the blood curse, even if it can't be cured. Don't forget, Artel also has the elf gem, the Elisa gem. That is the thing that can cure all the diseases, pains, and curses in the world. All in all, Artel is 100% sure of getting Nagini back to normal, and has a firm hold on him by other means. As for the harvest, Nagini can speak Parseltongue, so Artel can open the secret room ahead of time to get more plot points, and don't forget, Nagini used to be Dumbledore's teammate. Artel can make her appear in Dumbledore skillfully in front of Leto, and then broke into the interior of the Order of the Phoenix. Artel's thoughts were like lightning. Nagini crawled up to Voldemort obediently, and Voldemort spoke to Nagini in Parseltongue. Soon, Artel saw Nagini come to him and lowered his head slightly. Brain. It is surrendering. Artel smiled and said to Voldemort. It's a pleasure to work with, and I hope you can recover soon. After all, the world will be more and more interesting. Voldemort didn't understand the meaning of Artel's words, but he smiled sullenly. I'll be back with soon. He said so, and disappeared from the back of Quirrell's head. Quirrell put the hood back on, glanced at Artel, and asked. Mr. Saruman, do you want to go back with me? No, I'm just going to do something. Artel declined Quirrell's invitation, and Quirrell nodded and apparated away. After making sure Quirrell was gone, Artel looked at Nagini and smiled. A silver brooch appeared in his hand. Nagini turned his head, watching Artel silently. Artel took the brooch unhurriedly, and an indescribable force was used in Artel's body. As if he controls the sun, controls the light, controls life. Artel reached out his hand slightly and placed his palm on Nagini's head. It feels cold and slippery to the touch. Artel looked at it calmly, smiled slightly, and an endless green light bloomed on his hands. Nagini, your curse is over. The dazzling green light slowly dissipated. What caught my eye was a snow-white figure, slender and slender. Artel blushed, waved his hand, and under the magic of transfiguration, a robe appeared on Nagini's body. That's right, Nagini has returned to human form. Not only that, but Artel has something more on his hands. He opened his palm, and a very ugly, baby-like soul fragment was lying quietly on his hand. This is Voldemort's split soul, originally hidden in Nagini's body. However, because of the healing effect of the Elisa gem, Nagini's original state was directly restored, and Voldemort's soul fragments were removed as garbage. It's just that because the power of the Elisa gem is too powerful and very soft, Voldemort, who was asleep in the distance, didn't notice it at all. Only when he wanted to contact Nagini would he find that his Horcrux had disappeared. Seeing that Nagini was about to wake up, Artel realized that he was still Saruman now. Nagini was going to Hogwarts in the future, and if he saw any unnatural expression on his face, it might make Dumbledore suspicious. Anyway, the means he intends to control Nagini is to sign a soul contract, magic from a necromancer. No matter what he becomes, his soul will not change. Hey, Nagini on the ground let out an unconscious hum, as if feeling the cold on the ground. She sat up suddenly. This is where, looking at the unfamiliar environment around him, Nagini felt that his thoughts became very confused. She remembers. To fight against Grindelwald and to rescue Credence, she joins Dumbledore's team. Then, her blood magic spell is becoming more and more visible, the time to become a human is less and less, and the time to become a snake is more and more. I've completely turned into a snake. A look of sadness flashed in Nagini's eyes. Although she had already made preparations for this day to come, Nagini couldn't help but feel the sadness in her heart when it really happened. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and Nagini pursed her lips and wiped it with her hand. Then she was completely stunned. Hand, I have a hand. Nagini reacted at once. She looked at her hands, looked at her legs. It felt like a dream. I didn't turn into a snake. Or am I okay, or just dreaming? Nagini's thoughts became more and more chaotic. At this time, an old voice suddenly sounded in her ear. How long do you want my old man to wait? Nagini turned her head subconsciously, and saw a majestic old man looking at her with a smile. It's just that his eyes are a little weird. Just like in the movie, Asians should be from Banksy. Because Nagini was lying on the ground before, Artel didn't see her face, just noticed her body. Seeing his face now, he was a little dazed for a while. You are. The long-term experience of living in the circus made Nagini develop a cautious character. She stood up, wrapped her robe tightly, and slowly took 2 steps back. Have you forgotten everything? Artel frowned. Elisa gem is so domineering. Directly delete Nagini's memory. Or just change back to a human. The human memory and the snake's memory had a conflict. Artel stretched out the scepter in his hand and tapped in front of Nagini, and a special magic surged out, covering Nagini. Nagini originally wanted to resist, but she found that this force did not have any malicious intent. Instead, it gave her a warm feeling, and even her aching head was relieved a lot. She slowly closed her eyes, and memory fragments flashed through her mind like a movie. It's been so long, I've been a snake for so many years. Voldemort. Nagini's face became odd. Because Voldemort speaks Parseltongue and can communicate with her, Nagini became his pet after first encountering Voldemort, and later Voldemort turned her into a Horcrux. Nagini clenched her fists fiercely, but she knew how terrible Voldemort was, and in the end she could only let it go. At the end of the memory, Artel put his hand on top of her head with a kind expression on her face, telling her that her curse would end. Now, she has recovered her body and her memory. Nagini remembered everything, opened her eyes, knelt on the ground, and sincerely thanked Artel. Thank you, great Mr. Saruman. Without your words, I may never be able to turn back into a human being. Nagini has no way of repaying it, and is willing to follow Mr. Nagini knelt on the ground, a little uneasy in his heart. She can perceive that the other party is a very powerful wizard, so she is willing to follow the other party's side. She knew a lot of Voldemort's secrets, and if Voldemort was really resurrected and found himself out of his control, he would not let him go. As for Dumbledore, Nagini felt that the other party would not necessarily believe him, so it was better to hold the thigh in front of him tightly. It's a clever one. Artel smiled. His scepter stopped in front of him for a moment, and the magic turned into a contract. This is the master-servant contract. I need a drop of your blood. After Artel finished speaking, Nagini hesitated for a moment, then spilled a drop of blood on the pact. Soon, Nagini felt that there seemed to be some kind of connection between her own soul and Artel's soul. She wanted to explore it. I couldn't help trembling. That's a soul with supreme majesty, dark as an abyss, and more evil than hell. The old man who looks kind, how can his soul be so evil? Voldemort is like a child compared to him. Nagini knew that he had just left the wolf's den and entered the tiger's den, but he had no choice. The contract had been signed, and he could only resign. Artel also sensed the change in Nagini. She just wanted to spy on her own soul, but was backlashed. His soul is bound to the Lord of the Rings. Isn't this courting death? Nagini, I can forgive your ignorance, but if there is a next time, you will end badly. Artel held out his hand, and a green light healed Nagini's wounds. This made Artel very satisfied, and he felt that he could become a priest after he brought the elf gem. I heal your curse, and there is indeed something you need to do. Hearing Artel say this, Nagini's expression became respectful, and she knelt on the ground, quietly waiting for Artel's order. Go to Hogwarts, find Dumbledore, and join the Order of the Phoenix. I'll get back to you when I need it. Artel put his palm on Nagini's forehead and whispered. Don't be afraid, your soul has belonged to me. Even Dumbledore can't see any secrets from it, but you can tell him that your curse was cured by a woman called Galadriel. His hand slid across the air, and a curtain of water appeared in front of Nagini's eyes, with the appearance of a noble woman appearing on it. Remember what she looks like. This is Galadriel. You just have to remember that she walked in the forest, met you as a snake, and healed your curse with a bottle of starlight. After Artel finished speaking, he sealed Voldemort's soul fragment with magic, put it in a box, and handed it to her. Give this to Dumbledore and he will believe you. Let's live a good life, and when the time comes, I will find you. With that said, Artel apparates and leaves. Nagini looked at the box in her hand, and then looked back at the jungle where she had lived for many years. She pursed her lips, with a smile and new joy on her face, and walked towards the city in the distance. When Artel returned to Hogwarts, it was time for dinner. Quirrell on the professor's seat was obviously very happy. Several professors around him noticed his strangeness. Snape stared at Quirrell for a long time, but he didn't understand what the hell he was doing. Quirrell just said he thought of something happy. Snape's heart skipped a beat, thinking Quirrell had already succeeded, so he ran to the fourth floor to take a look, only to find that everything was fine. When Snape returned to the Great Hall, seeing that Quirrell was still eating happily, he rolled his eyes and sighed at the same time that if he cared about him, he was confused. If Quirrell had succeeded, he would have run away long ago. Artel knew that Quirrell would definitely act this evening, but it was a pity that even if he had the invisibility potion, and even if he had gotten Momo, Quirrell wouldn't be able to get the Philosopher's Stone. The stone is in Arised sunglasses. Dumbledore casts magic, and he can only get it if he wants the Philosopher's Stone and doesn't want to use the Philosopher's Stone. Playing with Dumbledore, playing with the rule makers. Wash and sleep. Artel looked at Quirrell, who was happy, and prayed silently for him in his heart. How happy Quirrell is now, how desperate Quirrell was at night. At the end of dinner time, the little wizards returned to the lounge one after another under the leadership of the prefect. Some people stayed in the lounge to chat. Some people went back to the dormitory to sleep. Artel washed up, went back to bed, summed up what happened today. And Quirrell also returned to his lounge early to rest. His actions at night were very important, and he must keep his spirits up in advance. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Quirrell opened his eyes in the darkness. He put on a black robe and took out the invisibility potion that Artel had given him. Saruman, great wise, he wouldn't deceive poor Quirrell. Quirrell muttered and drank the potion in one gulp. An indescribable magic enveloped him, and Quirrell walked to the mirror and found himself invisible. The potion is real. Incredible. Incredible. The excitement in Quirrell's heart was indescribable. He gently opened the door, glanced at the empty corridor, and walked towards the forbidden area on the 4th floor. Quirrell, as a professor at Hogwarts, has a bad heart for the Philosopher's Stone, so he often observes Filch's patrol route. At this time, it is the peak time for the little wizards of Gryffindor to travel at night, so Filch and his cat are usually on the 7th and 8th floors of the castle. The only thing Quirrell had to watch out for was Snape, because this guy also loves night walks. Last Christmas Eve, Quirrell tried to get into the 4th floor and ran into Snape. When Snape taught him a lesson, he also accidentally found Harry wearing the invisibility cloak, but at that time he was envious of Quirrell and always wanted to steal the invisibility cloak, but there was no chance. He had no reason to enter Harry's bedroom, and he couldn't hide the portrait of the fat lady at the entrance to the Gryffindor lounge, and once he did, everyone would know he stole the cloak, and he was done. Thinking wildly, Quirrell came to the 4th floor. The surroundings were silent and empty. Quirrell slowed his pace and came to the deepest room in the forbidden area almost silently. Looking at the locked wooden door, Quirrell took out his wand and chanted a relatively advanced unlocking spell. Clap! The lock on the door shattered, and Quirrell gently opened the door. In the room, Mau Mau, the three-headed dog, was sleeping soundly, and the sound of opening the door only moved his ears, but when Quirrell stepped into the room, Mau Mau's three noses began to twitch, and his eyelids began to shake. Apparently, it smelled Quirrell. Seeing that Mau Mau was about to wake up, Quirrell prayed in his heart, took out the music box, twisted the mainspring below it a few times, and then opened the music box. Ring the bell, Merry Christmas. Cheerful music played in the music box. Mau Mau's ears moved, a humanized and comfortable expression appeared on his face, and the eyelids that he wanted to open became heavier, and finally he fell into a drowsy sleep. Sure enough, Saruman is really. Quirrell didn't know what to say at this time. While shocked by the omniscient Saruman, he also felt a deep fear. He took a deep breath, put the music box next to Mau Mau, and then laboriously lifted its claws, revealing the trapdoor below. He had already inquired about the arrangements of the other professors. As long as he passed Mau Mau, Quirrell would have the confidence to get the Philosopher's Stone. Without hesitation, Quirrell jumped from the trapdoor in excitement. It's not the first time he's been here. When the professors set traps, Quirrell was responsible for transporting the trolls in, so he's been here before. Puff! Quirrell fell on a piece of soft vegetation. He knew it was the Devil's Web, and Professor Sprout had to work so hard to get it. Quirrell's wand lit up with a dazzling light, and the Devil's Web was stimulated by the light, twisted frantically to avoid it, and put Quirrell down. Quirrell walked down the stone corridor passage. There was the sound of water droplets around, and about 3 minutes later, Quirrell came to a bright room. The sound of rustling and metal colliding was heard everywhere in the room, which was a bit harsh. Quirrell raised his head, his eyes fixed on the hundreds of winged keys. Flitwick's little trick. Quirrell smiled disdainfully. His wand stretched out, a dazzling light flashed past, and a flying key was violently pulled over. The other keys turned around like crazy, trying to attack Quirrell. They didn't have eyes, and they didn't rely on their eyes to find enemies, so Quirrell's stealth effect was of no use to them. However, as a light wave flashed past, these keys seemed to have lost their lives, quietly floating under the ceiling. Quirrell put his wand down, grabbed the key that unlocked the lock, opened the door, and disarmed himself. All keys were restored to their original state. Stupid Flitwick. Quirrell sneered and walked out of the room. After a dim corridor, Quirrell came to the second room. After he stepped into the room, the originally dark room immediately became brightly lit, and the torches around the room burned violently, revealing its original appearance. It's a huge chessboard. Minerva McGonagall's Transfiguration. Quirrell stood on the chessboard. He carefully walked to the edge of the chessboard, cast a magic spell on himself, and then walked out swaggeringly. It seems a little too simple. Quirrell, who walked out, felt a little weird himself. He thought about it and found a reason for himself. Maybe it's the reason for the invisibility potion, or maybe it's the spell my master taught me. Quirrell muttered and came to the door behind White. After opening the door easily, Quirrell came to the next room. This is the room he arranged, and there is a huge mountain monster in it, which is about a circle bigger than the one he released on Halloween. It stinks. Quirrell covered his nose. The smell of the troll was so strong that even Quirrell, who had been baptized by the smell of garlic, couldn't bear it. Well, Seeing that the door was opened, the troll thought someone was coming in, with a happy expression on his face. It has been here for several months. Although it is not worrying about eating and drinking, it is really boring. Every day except for eating and sleeping. But what surprised the troll was that although the door was open, no one was seen. Suck 1. The troll twitched its nose, and it smelled Quirrell. The troll stood up and walked towards Quirrell, with a puzzled expression on his face. Do not come near me. Quirrell fought back the urge to vomit, and with a flick of his wand, a bursting spell flew out and exploded on the troll's head. Well, the troll, who hadn't seen anyone, didn't have time to react. After making a suspicious voice, a strong sense of dizziness struck, and he fell to the ground with a thud. A large bloody bag quickly bulged on its head, which looked very funny. Call. Quirrell quickly passed through the room, and then heaved a long sigh of relief. Who can this stupid thing stop? Dumbledore is so confused. Quirrell muttered, suddenly feeling something was wrong. Is Dumbledore a fool? Obviously not, otherwise Voldemort would have no reason to be so afraid of him. So what was the point of Dumbledore doing this? Sprout's Devil's Web, Flitwick's Key Array, McGonagall's Magic Chess. Nothing hard to crack. Also, I seem to have seen a broomstick in the Key Array. Quirrell shuddered suddenly, and he began to have some doubts, but he had already come here, and it was absolutely impossible to retreat. I want to see what tricks he plays. A chill flashed in Quirrell's eyes as he walked into the next room. When he stepped in, a purple flame suddenly rose from the entrance behind him, and a black flame also rose from the exit in front of the room. Black flame, Quirrell murmured. He remembered that he had vaguely heard about black flames somewhere, as if. Grindelwald. Quirrell remembered that he had read in a book that Grindelwald had tried to destroy Paris with a black fire. What the hell is Dumbledore up to? Quirrell didn't have time to think about it, he looked at the things in the room. A long table, 7 bottles. Snape's trick. Quirrell picked up the parchment on the table and looked at the hints on it. The feeling of unease grew stronger. If Dumbledore really wanted to protect the Philosopher's Stone, why leave a hint? That black flame can completely stop most people, even wizards who have been famous for many years, may turn into ashes in the black flames. But leave a hint, isn't it just to let people pass? Quirrell scanned the prompts quickly, and quickly figured out the key. He is an outstanding graduate of Ravenclaw College, and he can still do a simple logical reasoning problem. Quirrell picked up the smallest bottle on the table, took a sip, and walked into the black flame without hesitation. He was not attacked, just as I guessed, Quirrell murmured as he entered the final room. This is the organ arranged by Dumbledore. Let me see. Huh. Quirrell, who came in, was stunned. Because there is nothing in the room. Quirrell's eyes widened, and he searched the room reluctantly, but found nothing. Of course he didn't know that Dumbledore had put the Philosopher's Stone in the Mirror of Erised, and that mirror was now in a room in the castle, a place that Harry visited every night. Owner. No way, Quirrell could only wake up the sleeping Voldemort. Voldemort was silent for a while and let out a sneer as Quirrell recounted his puzzling experience along the way. Dumbledore. He. Voldemort's wrath can be imagined. Quirrell has come here, the final place, but the Philosopher's Stone is not there. Dang, Li Jiao Bordeaux deceived him. Tricked him. No wonder he's letting that stupid Hagrid get the Philosopher's Stone, no wonder he's letting these professors set up pointless levels. So he's kidding me. Voldemort let out a frantic roar, Quirrell shivered with fright, and after a while, Voldemort's voice came out. I think Dumbledore deliberately set such a trap in order to catch the mice in the castle. Fortunately, you drank the invisibility potion. Go back and find another chance, I'm sure the Philosopher's Stone is at Hogwarts. Hearing what Voldemort said, Quirrell had no choice but to choose the same path back to Zed. When he went back, Quirrell also drank the potion from the round bottle in order to pass the purple flame. After passing a few rooms, Quirrell returned to Mau Mau's side, he picked up the music box, and suddenly his expression changed. He had just noticed that there seemed to be a note inside the music box. At first, he didn't notice it because he focused on the 3-headed dog. Quirrell glanced at the sleeping Mau Mau and took out the note. If there is no gain, you can try to look in the mirror, Saruman. Looking in the mirror. What does it mean? Did Saruman know I wouldn't get the Philosopher's Stone? Quirrell pondered, wondering what special mirrors were in Hogwarts. It can't be in the bathroom. Quirrell turned off the music box and left the room, thinking thoughtfully. Just when he wanted to return to his office, a series of footsteps suddenly sounded in his ears. Quirrell stopped and looked around. There was no one there. It's Harry. Harry Potter. Quirrell realized that it must be Harry Potter with the cape. He had long heard that Harry was very jumpy recently, and he often wore a cape to run around the castle at night. Filch had said more than once that if he caught evidence of Harry's night wandering, he would be punished to clean the toilet and so on. Follow. See what he's up to. Quirrell didn't know why he suddenly had such an idea, but he still decided to follow his heart and followed the sound of his footsteps. Unexpectedly, after what happened last time, Harry's courage has grown a lot. Quirrell followed behind Harry and couldn't help but sigh. How dare you be so big? Simply too big. In the empty corridor, Harry Potter walked in a hurry. His footsteps were so obvious that even the sleeping portrait was awakened. Quirrell was different, carefully following behind Harry without making a sound. And just like that, Quirrell followed Harry all the way to an abandoned room on the corner of the library floor. What is this place? Abandoned classroom. What is Harry doing here? Quirrell gently followed in. There were a bunch of dilapidated desks and chairs in the room. As he had guessed, this was an abandoned classroom. But what he didn't expect was that in the middle of the classroom, there was a gorgeous, huge mirror. The Mirror of Arise. Quirrell exclaimed in his heart. He had seen this famous thing in books, but Quirrell didn't remember that it belonged to Hogwarts. Who put it here? Quirrell pondered, suddenly thinking of the note in the music box. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Quirrell's eyes grew brighter and he seemed to understand. It's unbelievable. Saruman, oh my god, he's just horrible. It must be Dumbledore, who brought the Mirror of Arise, hid the Philosopher's Stone in it, and performed magic. But why did Dumbledore put the mirror here? Quirrell pondered, and Harry had taken off his invisibility cloak by this time, and he put the cloak next to him and sat down in front of the mirror with his knees folded. What did he see in the mirror? Quirrell felt a little curious when he saw Harry like this. The Mirror of Arise CGEB can reflect what a person's heart desires most, and Quirrell wonders what Harry wants most, and seeing how obsessed he looks, it might be something amazing. After all, he was prophesied to kill his master. Correct. Prophecy. Quirrell was shocked, as if a flash of lightning flashed across his mind. At this moment, Quirrell suddenly realized, all confusion disappeared, and he completely understood where the violations of those traps were. Harry Potter was the prophesied son who was prophesied to kill Voldemort, but he hasn't grown up now. Dumbledore wants to take the opportunity to make Harry grow up. It must be so. No wonder those agencies are so playful, not only have no power, but also have obvious customs clearance methods, as if Dumbledore wanted someone to go in and steal the Philosopher's Stone. Quirrell had thought that Dumbledore was playing with him, playing with Voldemort, but now it seems that it is very likely that he is wrong. Dumbledore is exorcising Harry Potter. He wants Harry Potter to catch himself. So now, Dumbledore sent this mirror to Harry Potter. The more Quirrell thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. If he guessed right, Hagrid must have told Harry Potter about the Philosopher's Stone. In this way, what is the probability that Dumbledore already knows my identity? The reason why he kept me is to train Harry. Quirrell's face showed anger, and he became Harry's stepping stone. No wonder. No wonder. As expected of the famous Dumbledore. Quirrell would still be complacent about his disguise if he hadn't stumbled across this tonight. After thinking about this, Quirrell subconsciously wanted to leave, but then he thought of Voldemort. His face became ugly again. If he left, where could he go? Voldemort was in his body, and if he ran away, Voldemort would not let him go. A chill flashed in Quirrell's eyes as he wondered whether or not to kill Harry while no one was there. Didn't Dumbledore want to use him to make Harry grow up? Then he would just kill Harry, and everyone should have a good time. Quirrell put his hand on the magic wand around his waist, but didn't pull it out, and he hesitated again. Did Dumbledore prepare for it in advance? Can I really kill Harry myself? Not even Voldemort can kill him. The boy who lived. Quirrell finally gave up, and after thinking about it, he set his eyes on the invisibility cloak beside Harry. The invisibility potion can only last for half an hour, and it will soon expire, and I only have one bottle. If I take the invisibility cloak, it will be more convenient in the future. Thinking like this, Quirrell quietly walked to Harry's side, saw that he was still staring at the Mirror of Arise, sneered silently, stretched out his hand to take the invisibility cloak, and left quietly. Harry, who was addicted to the Mirror of Arise, didn't notice it until half an hour later. Harry, who felt a little cold, planned to leave. "Mom and Dad, I'll see you again tomorrow." Harry said so, reaching for the cloak next to him, but it was empty. Harry was stunned for a moment, and quickly turned his head to see that there was nothing on the ground. "Where's my cloak?" Confused, Harry looked around, stood up, and looked around. "The cloak is gone." Harry was confused. Did someone just come? But it shouldn't. Is it Peeves' prank? Harry couldn't figure it out, but the invisibility cloak was indeed lost. It's over. Harry's heart was beating wildly, and the problem before him was how to get back. When there was an invisibility cloak before, he roamed Harry at night without Filch on his back many times, relying on his invisibility to run Filch all over the castle, but he was so angry. If Filch caught this time, Harry couldn't imagine how miserable it would be. Can't be caught by him. Must not. Don't go back at all. Leave after breakfast. Harry shuddered, and although it was almost February, the night temperature was still very low. Especially in this abandoned classroom, the temperature was even cooler, unlike the burning fireplace in the lounge in Gryffindor Tower. Harry curled up, walked to the corner of the pile of waste tables and chairs, found some waste paper there, spread it on the ground, sat on it, hugged his shoulders, and slept dazedly with anxiety, confusion and anger. At breakfast the next morning, Harry looked sullen. He asked for a large bowl of hot mushroom soup and drank it slowly while holding the soup bowl. "Harry seems ill," Hermione whispered in Artel's ear. He glanced at Artel worriedly, and reminded, "You have to pay more attention to your body, otherwise it will be bad if you catch a cold." "Harry is sick. Are you worried about me?" In a good mood, Artel turned to look at Hermione and squeezed her cheek. "You too, cover the quilt at night, although your pajamas are very thick, but you like to kick the quilt." Artel's words came to an abrupt end. Hermione looked at him oddly. How did Artel know that his pajamas were thick and he liked to kick the quilt? "Ahem. When we were on the train before, your mother said." Artel was a little guilty at Hermione's gaze, so he made an excuse. "Is that so?" Hermione frowned and thought. "Why don't I remember my mother said?" "Maybe you didn't pay attention, otherwise how would I know? I can't go to the Gryffindor girls' bed to watch you sleep." "What did you say?" Hermione gave Artel an embarrassed look, and the moment of shyness and beauty was overwhelming. "Even if you want to go, you can't get in, There is magic in the bedroom of Hogwarts, especially the female bedroom. Boys can't enter the female bedroom. Harry and Ron tried it before, and when they went up the stairs, they would fall down under the power of magic. However, there are not so many restrictions for girls to go to boys' dormitories. Speaking of which, Harry must have been frozen during the night tour. The weather at night has been very cold recently. Artel changed the subject. Today is January 31st, and tomorrow will be February. And today is also the day when the system summon permission is refreshed. Yeah, Ron said Harry didn't come back all night last night and he was worried. Hermione glanced at Harry and saw him drinking soup with a runny nose, feeling a little pitiful and justified. Hermione had always hated night walks since the last 50 points deducted for stopping Harry and Ron. "Maybe it's something important," Artel said something thoughtfully, and he looked at the professor's chair, where Quirrell was having breakfast, but he didn't look as good as last night, and the smile on his face disappeared. Quirrell must not have gotten the Philosopher's Stone last night, and Dumbledore probably hasn't put it in the Chamber of Secrets. Artel remembers that Dumbledore moved the Mirror of Arise away later, because Harry often went to the mirror to see his parents when he was free. Dumbledore saw that the time was right, and after talking with Harry, take the mirror to the secret room. And the final battle between Harry and Quirrell in the depths of the secret room happened after the final exam, and there are still 3 or 4 months left. The plot is too slow. It's delaying my plot point. I have to find a way to help Quirrell. Artel didn't know Quirrell met Harry last night when he left the Chamber of Secrets, or that he stole Harry's invisibility cloak, but he left his note in Quirrell's music box. With Quirrell's wisdom, it should be possible to guess that the Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the Mirror of Arise by Dumbledore. After dinner, Artel and Hermione left the Great Hall. It's the weekend, they don't have class. Artel and Hermione make an appointment to find an empty classroom for dual training. Hermione mastered more magic spells than most young wizards. In addition to basic magic spells, she also mastered some middle-level magic spells, including the whole body binding spell, fire spell, fixed body spell, and so on. As for those little incantations, there are more, such as leg mixing spells, pimple spells, grinning, and hulala. Although the spells mastered by both sides of the duel will affect the outcome of the battle to a certain extent, Hermione, you have to remember that the more spells mastered, the more powerful the wizard is. The most important thing in battle is timing. If you grasp the timing well, a magic spell can make the opponent lose the ability to resist, or even lose their lives. Artel explained his experience to Hermione. So even if you can do 100 or 1,000 spells, the 1 or 2 spells that have an effect in the end are just those 1 or 2 spells, just like now. Artel held out her wand at the thoughtful Hermione. Accept your weapons. A flash of light flashed, and the wand in Hermione's hand flew into Artel's. Without a magic wand, you who cannot cast spells without a stick will become the target of slaughter, and what I just cast is a weapon that removes you. The curse. Then the result is predictable. Hermione pursed her lips, snorted, and said, "That's because I wasn't prepared for you. If it was someone else." Yes, Artel complied, handing the wand to Hermione. So you have to develop a habit of protecting yourself at the beginning of the battle. Artel's wand turned and circled around his body. Hundreds of evils do not invade. A gleam of white light enveloped him. I teach you the purpose of the light shield spell. After casting the light shield spell, as long as you are more careful, you will basically be invincible. After all, this spell can resist most black magic, even unforgivable curse. Hermione's nose made a humming sound. She nodded, and cast a light shield spell like Artel. There are not many of the spells you have learned that have strong lethality. Whole body restraint spells, immobilization spells, and stun spells are all control types. Although these spells can make the enemy lose the ability to resist, they are not fatal. Artel looked at Hermione, was silent for a moment, and said, "If it's not fatal, the enemy may come back. Even if the opponent is sent to Azkaban, he may escape from prison and kill you silently." It's not actually Hermione's fault, it's the same for the little wizards at Hogwarts. Due to the Voldemort incident a few years ago, the entire British wizarding world is still in a state of black discoloration, and the attitude towards dark wizards and black magic is extremely bad. In order not to produce a Dark Lord, the school also tried its best to instill the theory of dark magic and evil in the little wizards. This has also led to the fact that most of the little wizards have an instinctive aversion to black magic, so in the choice of magic learning, they will also subconsciously avoid black magic. Except for those with ulterior motives in the little Death Eater group. Just like Hermione and the others, most of them would choose spells such as stun spells and restraint spells when learning magic. It was not until Voldemort made a comeback that the power of such spells was not enough, so they started to learn spells such as blasting spells and smashing spells. However, since I have developed a habit of using it since I was a child, I will still use it subconsciously against the enemy. After all, this kind of magic is easy to use. When Artel watched the movie, he was so pissed off. The magic used by the Death Eaters or all-powerful lethal spells are simply unforgivable spells, but Harry and the others, as soon as they make a shot, they will faint, remove your weapons or turn them all into stone. As a result, after the fight, he suffered heavy losses, and the opponent made a comeback after a simple rest. Simply outrageous. Hearing Artel say this, Hermione stuck out her tongue and said half-jokingly, "But they say no one can escape Azkaban. Many people can escape. The Ministry of Magic has been attacked, let alone a prison." Artel smiled. Azkaban is the focus of his plan. He will release those Death Eaters sooner or later, and whether Azkaban still exists is a question. And don't think that black magic is something unforgivable. Our headmaster, Mr. Dumbledore, is the greatest white wizard of this century, but he has no less black magic than the Dark Lord. Hermione's eyes widened, showing a melon-eating expression. Ahem, about the principal, I'll have the opportunity to talk to you later, but then again, it's just that some black magic needs to have malice in the wizard's heart, such as the unforgivable curse. You don't have to learn this type of black magic, but strong offensive spells like explosion spells and smashing spells still need to be mastered proficiently. The wizarding world will not be peaceful in the future. Although I have you to protect you, it is impossible for me to cover everything, and you have to become a witch wizard on your own. I know. Hermione nodded obediently, and looked at Artel with delight. I will not let you down, Hermione said, rolling her eyes, suddenly raising her wand and attacking Artel. Passing out. Wow. Before Hermione's spell was finished, she saw Artel waved her wand, and the sleeve of her right hand suddenly turned into a big black snake. Hermione screamed immediately, and frantically swung her arms, trying to throw the big snake out of her arm, and even threw out her own wand. Artel hugged Hermione gently, comforted her, looked at Hermione who was aggrieved and pouted, smiled embarrassedly, and said, "That's the second point I'm going to teach you, the role of transfiguration in wizarding duels." At night, Artel went back to the bedroom. Hermione's talent in combat is not strong, but not bad. Under Artel's special training, Hermione has made great progress today. Before the two separated, Hermione had learned to use simple polymorphism to trouble the enemy. For example, she tried to turn Artel's soul into a pegboard. Although she failed, at least the idea was good. It also made Artel aware of a problem. That is, most wizards don't know much about Muggle objects, many things they don't even know, just like Ron, seeing the coins that Aunt Harry gave him would be novel. So if it was Ron, he would never have thought of using transfiguration to create a pegboard to fight. Because the nail plate is something that most wizards have never seen before, and they may not even know what the nails are. After all, wizards can solve most of the things in life by magic. Therefore, Muggle-born wizards like Artel and Hermione, when using transfiguration, will instead create a new style of duel because of their brains. In addition to Hermione's improvement in dueling skills, the relationship between Artel and Hermione has grown by leaps and bounds. The reason, of course, was because Artel hugged Hermione. Hermione was so frightened by the snake that Artel had made, she screamed, and Artel was a little flustered at the time, so he hugged her to comfort her. And Hermione, after being hugged, she was naturally stunned on the spot, so that she didn't understand what Artel said later. Although the situation at the time was indeed not romantic, Hermione still felt her heartbeat speed up, and she started thinking wildly, so that although the two of them were separated, Hermione's eyes on Artel were still very charming. Grow up quickly, grow up quickly. Artel wished he could cast a magic trick that would make him grown up when he woke up tomorrow. Forget it, let's draw a lottery. Artel glanced at the system, and the system permissions were updated during dinner, but it was not suitable for the auditorium at that time, so Artel ignored the system. System, extract the Lord of the Rings items. Ding. Congratulations to the host, the item Dunedin Star was successfully extracted. What star? Another gem. Artel looked at the extracted item with anticipation. He thought it was something similar to Alyssa's gem, but he didn't expect it to be an ordinary badge. The Star of Dunedin, the silver pin that the northern nomads fasten on their cloak, shaped like a radiating star, is a symbol of the identity of the Dundane in the north. What rubbish. Artel put the Dundane star into the system space. He didn't know if he would use it in the future, but he should keep it anyway. The storage space of the system is infinite, and it's not too bad. Continue to summon creatures. Artel's mood has calmed down, he has drawn good things for 2 consecutive months, and it doesn't matter if this month is free. Ding. Congratulations to the host for successfully summoning Toshin. Toshin. It's a tough name. Artel looked at the storage space of the system characters, and his thoughts stopped abruptly. In the system space at this time, a behemoth was asleep. The previous ant giant oak was big enough, but compared with this tower mountain, it looked like a child. It has to be more than 20 meters long, 6 or 7 meters high. Artel murmured that he already knew what it was. It's a mammoth, or rather, a mammoth. Gray skin, limbs like towering giant trees, ears bigger than sails, sharp fangs 3 or 4 meters long, and a nose like a giant python. This is a terrifying tool of war trained by the Horrid, and when war breaks out, mammoths will rampage across the battlefield carrying a tower full of throwers and archers. Even a troll, or a strong orc, will be stomped into meat patties by it. This thing, a war killer, I'm afraid that ordinary dragons are not its opponents. Artel didn't know where to put it either. It would cause immeasurable damage no matter where it was placed. Artel has no doubts that if he now put this thing in the Ministry of Magic like the giant oak, within an hour, the wizarding world will hear the news that the Ministry of Magic in London has been trampled down. Save it for now. I'll talk about it later. Artel doesn't have a good idea right now. If it doesn't work, just throw this thing into the Congo Basin. As for whether it will rush out of the basin and have any effect on the locals, Artel said casually, maybe the tribes over there will worship Toshin as a god or not. Or do some research to see if you can get an elephant clan strong orc. If it is really researched, this may be an existence that is even fiercer than a dragon clan strong orc. Artel thought silently, and began to refer to the experimental data in Saruman's notebook. After an unknown amount of time, he fell asleep in a daze. The next day is Monday, the happy weekend is over, and the little wizards of Hogwarts are about to start a busy week of study and life. Artel they have a flying lesson in the morning and herbal medicine in the afternoon. Hermione's talent in flying is somewhat poor. Although Hermione has been able to summon her broom proficiently after taking so many lessons, her manipulation in the sky is still somewhat unsatisfactory. As for Artel, he's completely flat after his freshness on broomsticks has passed. Because this thing is really uncomfortable, even though it has a saddle like a bicycle seat, Artel still feels a little slap in the ass. Harry was different. His favorite thing was flying lessons, and according to his words, he liked the feeling of being free in the sky. Although Harry was ill, he still rode a broomstick in the sky several times, and Mrs. Hooch looked at him with satisfaction, complimented him several times, and even said that he could join Gryffindor when he was in the 3rd year. Quidditch house team. After the flight class, the herbal medicine class in the afternoon was more interesting. The plant that Professor Sprout brought was the devil's web. In this class, she focused on the characteristics and weaknesses of the devil's web. Hermione listened with interest, while Harry was groggy because of a cold. Kindness. It may be due to Harry's influence, Ron's upper and lower eyelids are also fighting, and Professor Sprout's knowledge is basically in the left ear and out the right ear. During dinner in the evening, a sudden throbbing came from the depths of Artel's soul. He raised his head and looked at the entrance of the Great Hall. Hermione keenly noticed his change, and followed him curiously. About 10 seconds later, Headmaster Dumbledore walked in, and behind him, followed by a beautiful and hot woman. It is the servant who signed the soul contract with Artel, Nagini. Nagini, finally at Hogwarts. A strange color flashed in Artel's eyes. If Nagini came, it would prove that Dumbledore should have accepted her initially, and when she joined the Order of the Phoenix, she could provide Artel with more information. At the same time, Quirrell, who was eating at the professor's seat, also raised his head and looked at Nagini with doubts in his eyes. Just now, he felt an angry emotion from Voldemort hidden in his body. The reason was because of that woman. Does this woman have anything to do with the master? Quirrell looked at Nagini suspiciously. It was obvious that he was an Asian wizard, and he was very young, only in his 20s. He couldn't see anything special. But feeling Voldemort's mood swings in his body getting bigger and bigger, Quirrell couldn't do anything about it. Although he wasn't full, he could only stand up and quietly left the auditorium. What? When Nagini passed the dining area of Gryffindor House, a suspicious voice came out of his mouth. Her eyes fell on Artel, who was eating. For some reason, Nagini had an inexplicable feeling that this child was very kind and had a sense of familiarity. What's wrong, Nagini? Dumbledore stopped and looked at her softly. It's okay, it just feels a little weird. Nagini's eyes fell on Dumbledore's face. She looked at him calmly, and said solemnly, I feel the breath of that man, Voldemort, he's here. Dumbledore's temples jumped slightly. He glanced at Quirrell's position just left, and whispered, I see, Nagini, don't mention that person's name at school. It's going to scare the kids. Let's go. I think you're hungry. Don't know if you remember Hogwarts food, then. Dumbledore took Nagini to the staff seat for dinner. Nagini didn't look at Artel again, and followed Dumbledore away. Pretty clever. Shadow. Artel knew that Nagini didn't recognize her, but she was clever enough to hide her uniqueness from Dumbledore. Hey, what are you looking at? Do you know that woman? Hermione looked at Artel with a bit of interest, and the words, I'm not happy, were written on her face. You mean that aunt? I don't know. Artel said solemnly. The word "and" made Hermione smile with joy. Although Nagini's appearance and state made it okay to call her sister, it was clear that the name Aunt was more in line with Hermione's wishes. Don't read it if you don't know it, people will say you are not polite. Hermione muttered softly. Nonsense, Artel, know the best manners. Artel retorted. He finished eating the food on the plate, wiped his mouth gracefully, and greeted Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape, who were looking at him not far away. And Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape also smiled back at Artel, and they were quite happy to see their appearance. Look, I said I know the best manners. Artel turned his head to show off to Hermione. Humph. Hermione was speechless. Snape liked Artel very much. After all, Artel was from Slytherin House, but Professor McGonagall, as the head of Gryffindor, liked Artel so much, which was annoying. Very angry. In the professor's chair, Nagini sat next to Dumbledore and thanked Mr. Dumbledore after dinner was prepared for her. In fact, Nagini was also very shocked when he first met Dumbledore. Before that, Nagini didn't realize how long she had been in a daze after turning into a snake, but when she saw Dumbledore, she realized that decades had passed. Back then, Dumbledore was middle-aged. He was wise, mature, and powerful. And now, he has become a kind old grandpa. Watching Nagini fall into memory, Dumbledore's eyes flashed with reminiscence. After a long time, he said softly, Newt and Tina are dealing with some things in Africa, but I've already sent them a message. I don't want him to come back soon. It's a joy to see you lift the curse in my lifetime. You can stay at Hogwarts in the future. I remember that you have learned a lot of ways to deal with curses, so you should stay in the school doctor's office first. Is that okay? Nagini nodded. In order to solve her own blood curse, she did learn a lot of magic to deal with curses, diseases, and even healing injuries. She could go to the school doctor's office. Dumbledore smiled, nodded, and said, Then we're done. But, Professor, that person's soul fragment. Dumbledore shook his head slightly, thinking about Nagini's words. There are some things that are not suitable to be brought up here. As for him, I have already made plans, and there will be no problems. Hearing Dumbledore say this, Nagini was relieved, while Quirrell quietly returned to his office. After he locked the door from the inside, he took off his turban. Owner, Quirrell called out cautiously, and after a while, Voldemort emerged from the back of Quirrell's head. Master, do you know that woman? Quirrell hesitated, but asked. Do not know. Voldemort's voice was hoarse, he gasped twice, and said to himself. I don't know her. But her breath is so familiar, like Nagini. Yes, that's right, it's Nagini. Nagini has been with that Saruman for days, don't know now. Nagini, where is Nagini? Voldemort recalled the breath just now, and immediately thought of Nagini. However, when he felt his soul carefully, he found that he couldn't contact Nagini at all. Nagini is dead. Voldemort didn't know that Nagini became a snake because of the blood curse. The outbreak of Nagini's curse completely turned into a serpent happened in Dumbledore's middle age, and now Dumbledore is 110 years old. The reason why Voldemort chose Nagini at that time, just because this big snake has spirituality, can communicate, and is powerful. So now seeing Nagini revived, Voldemort didn't know her. Saruman killed my Nagini. No, if the Horcrux was destroyed, I would have noticed it. Could it be that Saruman sealed it by some means? He found Nagini identity of. Who is that woman, and why does it smell like Nagini? Voldemort pondered laboriously. The remnant of his soul was not enough to support thinking about overly complicated things. Speaking of which, Voldemort himself. No matter what, he had to split his own soul, and as a result, he made himself ugly, not to mention stupid. Quirrell, find a way to help me find that woman, I want to know her information. Also, find the whereabouts of the Philosopher's Stone as soon as possible, otherwise, you are ready to hunt unicorns. After Voldemort finished speaking, he returned to Quirrell's body and fell asleep. The thinking just now consumed most of his strength, and now it is not enough to support him to continue. Yes, Master, Quirrell replied tremblingly, and after waiting for a while, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he didn't hear Voldemort speak. Too difficult. It's really hard. Quirrell wrapped his turban again, walked over to the table, and took the music box from the drawer. Silently pray. Great wise prophet, Saruman the legendary White Wizard. If you can hear me, please help poor Quirrell. Unfortunately, Quirrell's prayers went unanswered. Because at this time, the great white-robed Saruman, that is, Artel, has just returned to his bedroom. There will be a session of Professor McGonagall's Transfiguration tomorrow. Then again, Professor McGonagall hasn't given me extra points for a long time. Artel lay on the bed and checked the completion of his main quest. Artel has added 170 points so far. The 150 points required by the main quest have been completed, which means that Artel can actually lie flat, but in order to get more plot points, Artel must get more points. But the appetite of these professors has been raised by me. Artel gave a wry smile. In the beginning, the professors will give Artel extra points for his excellent completion of the tasks assigned by him. Later, Artel must overcomplete and infer other things to get extra points. And now, Artel needs to be better than the professor to get bonus points. Especially Professor McGonagall, who believes that Artel has an unparalleled talent in transfiguration, so the requirements for him are even higher. In last week's transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall asked them to try turning a beetle into a candy, and Artel turned it into a delicate hard candy, but Professor McGonagall believes that although the hard candy looks it's tempting, but doesn't give off a strong fruity flavor. So Artel missed the chance for extra points. Only Snape, who loves him as always, will give him 10 points as long as he completes the preparation of the potion as required. It's a pity that not every potion class will prepare potions. Most of the time they are learning how to handle potion materials, and Snape doesn't give the students extra points for such simple things. Tomorrow, whatever Professor McGonagall asks, I'm going to make it impeccable. There are still several months before the end of the period. Artel needs to score as much as possible. After all, he has to prepare for the worst. If he cannot summon Sauron in the future, he needs 50,000 plot points to exchange them in the system. Nagini has come to Hogwarts, which proves that Dumbledore has initially accepted her, and then he just needs to let nature take its course. On Voldemort's side, he should not know Nagini now, but he will definitely notice it. To what? However, he can't protect himself now, especially since Nagini handed over part of his soul to Dumbledore. Basically he doesn't need to think about it. Dazed, Artel fell asleep. This night, Artel slept soundly and had a good dream. Good morning, Malfoy. Getting out of bed, Artel greeted Malfoy with a smile when he saw Malfoy changing his clothes. Oh, good morning, Artel. Malfoy's response was somewhat unnatural. A member of the pure-blood Malfoy family, his education from an early age did not include the option of befriending a half-blood wizard. But Artel is a little different. His talent, strength, and even temperament are all envied by Malfoy. So much so that he dared not mention to his father Lucius that he had such a roommate. Ignoring Malfoy's entanglement, Artel changed his clothes, left the dormitory after washing, and when he came to the auditorium, Hermione just arrived. Have you heard? While eating, Hermione asked a question suddenly. What did you hear? Artel looked at her suspiciously, only hearing Malfoy say good morning this morning. It's that woman, the woman who came with the headmaster yesterday. She is a new staff member of the school, and now she is the school doctor like Ms. Pomfrey, responsible for the medical problems of the students. I don't know. How do you know? The school doesn't seem to have posted it. Usually, the school will post an announcement when such a new person takes office. When Artel came here today, he took a look outside the auditorium and didn't notice it. Hermione watched Artel and replied. What Neville said. Harry had a fever last night and was taken to the infirmary by Neville and Ron, and it was the woman who cured him. Well, it should be a good thing for the school. Artel didn't show any special emotions. He knew that last night when he was keenly aware of Nagini's arrival, Hermione still found something unusual. And yesterday, Nagini deliberately glanced at himself, and Hermione should have seen that scene too. This little girl's mind is still very delicate, especially when it comes to Artel, but she seems to forget that she is only 12 years old. Harry said that the new school doctor was very good, gentler than Madame Pomfrey, and said to be proficient in healing arts and the making of various decoctions. Ron also said that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Artel's mouth twitched. This guy Ron really dares to say that he is only 12 years old and knows what beauty is. But it seems that Ron is really like that. In the original book, he likes the Lady of the Three Broomsticks very much, and thinks she is very hot. If nothing else, Nagini's appearance and temperament are indeed very good, perhaps because he used to be a snake. Nagini has a seductive sense of charm. But Artel naturally knew that this was Hermione's temptation. After experiencing what happened some time ago, although Hermione didn't say it clearly, she should be her own little girlfriend, so she was very concerned about this kind of thing. After all, Hermione was 13, a year older than Artel. Ron is really, I think he may lack motherly love. By the way, why didn't he see him and Neville? They went to the infirmary and said they were taking Harry to see a doctor, but I don't think Harry's serious. Hermione snorted. She thought they were going to see Nagini, not just Ron and Harry, but that Neville guy as well. Neville's face was still red when Hermione smashed them in the lounge in the morning. Artel ate his breakfast silently, thinking that if Ron and Harry fell in love with Nagini, the style of painting seemed to get even stranger. If they knew Nagini and his 80s and 90s. If they like to see it, just watch it. Why are you angry? Artel decides to take the initiative and go Hermione's way, leaving Hermione nowhere to go. Sure enough, Hermione was stunned. She looked at Artel, suddenly panicked, and replied, "No, I'm not angry. I'm just..." Hermione didn't know what to say, because when she went back to the bedroom last night, Hermione tossed and couldn't fall asleep, and when she closed her eyes, it was Artel and Nagini. Why did Nagini feel her before Artel entered the auditorium? Why did Nagini look at Artel like that when he walked up to him? Dumbledore was in front of Nagini so she didn't see it, but Hermione was next to Artel and she could see it clearly. Oops, you bullied me. Hermione didn't know what to say, so she started to play tricks. Li Qian's tire couldn't help laughing. Hermione rolled him a look, knowing that Artel was teasing herself, so she laughed too. After dinner, the two planned to go to the classroom. When leaving the auditorium, Filch was posting a notice about Nagini's appointment. A photo of Nagini was posted on the notice. She was wearing a nurse's clothes. Ah, this celery. Artel's expression is weird. No wonder, no wonder. How about Harry? Ron and even Neville couldn't resist. Who can stop this? What to resist? Artel can imagine the scene where seniors will pretend to be sick and be admitted to the school infirmary. Hermione also saw that photo, and her expression became a little strange, and she hurriedly pulled Artel's sleeves upstairs. You're going to be late. Go, there's still half an hour left. Shut up, Artel, you're not allowed to go to the infirmary in the future unless Madame Pomfrey is on duty. 2 minutes before class, Harry, Ron and Neville hurried into the classroom. Neville sat down beside Artel, gasping for breath from the vigorous running. Artel glanced at him and said, I thought you were going to be late. No, we went to the school infirmary. You know, Harry's sick. Neville bowed his head embarrassedly, and Artel found that Neville was unusually shy as he had told Hermione. That school doctor is pretty. Well, Sister Nagini is beautiful and gentle. Neville paused, glanced at Artel in a panic, and hurriedly said, I did not mean that. Artel patted him on the shoulder, expressing his understanding. It seems that Neville does have a good impression of Nagini, although they can't be together, but if Neville's aesthetic is changed. In this case, what about Luna? Is the dream you had before coming true? Artel thought wildly. Professor McGonagall walked in, and the noisy classroom immediately quieted down. Good morning, classmates. Good morning, Professor McGonagall. The little wizards said hello to Professor McGonagall in unison. The serious woman had a smile on her face. She turned over the textbook and said, Today, we continue to practice transfiguration. Last week we tried to transform a beetle into a candy. Then this week, after we're going to turn the beetle into a candy, we'll turn the candy into a stone. The little wizard who can't turn the beetle into candy has to work hard today. If he can't succeed before the get out of class ends, his points will be deducted. Now start practicing. If you have any questions, you can discuss with each other. Of course, you can also ask me. Professor McGonagall handed the beetles to everyone's desk and looked at them with a smile. The little wizards began to act. Professor McGonagall patrolled the classroom, and patiently guided anyone who did not understand. Turn into stone. What kind of stone is perfect? Artel thought for a while, and had an idea in his mind. He gently stretched out his wand and aimed it at the beetle. The beetle soon turned into a delicate candy with a rich fruity flavor and bright colors, and then with a wave of Artel's wand, the candy changed again, into a sparkling blue diamond. Wow, it's so pretty. A small star appeared in Hermione's eyes beside him. Can you not look good? This is a colored diamond, the heart of the ocean. Artel muttered inwardly. He glanced at Hermione and whispered, I'll give it to you later. I don't want. Hermione knew that Artel was not joking, so she refused immediately. This thing was very precious at first sight. Although Hermione thought it was beautiful, she also felt it was unnecessary. Of course, despite what she said, Hermione was still very happy. Even the shock of being Nagini in the morning faded a little. Hermione does have a sense of crisis, because she has never seen such a beautiful witch at Hogwarts, not only full of exotic Asian but also an inexplicable temperament. The female professors at Hogwarts are all elderly, such as Professor McGonagall, Mrs. Hooch, Professor Sprout, Mrs. Pants. The youngest is in her 40s. And although some of the senior school sisters are very beautiful, they do not have the mature charm of Nagini, nor the mystery that people can't help but explore. Crucially, Hermione's sixth sense tells her that Artel and Nagini seem to have something to do, although Artel doesn't admit it. I think, I still have to trust Artel, he's been so good to me. Hermione's eyes softened as she watched Artel, and she suddenly felt a little silly. Nagini is so big, but Artel is younger than her, she will eat Nagini's vinegar. I think, I really like Artel. Hermione's heart was pounding, and she shook her head, pressing the thoughts to the bottom of her heart. I'm still young, I want to learn. I want to make myself better. Improve with Artel. Seeing Hermione's ruddy face, Artel didn't say a word, knowing that she was shy, so instead of teasing her, he raised his hand and gestured to Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall, I'm done. Professor McGonagall was not surprised, because she knew that Artel had fully mastered these basic transfigurations, and all she could do was to urge Artel to make it perfect. Professor McGonagall, CGEB, came over from the back of the classroom and immediately noticed the dazzling diamonds on Artel's table. A flash of surprise flashed in her eyes. She reached out her hand, and Professor McGonagall picked up the diamond and looked at it carefully. To the point of being completely fake. I repeat, Artel, you are the most gifted wizard in transfiguration I've ever found. I can't even imagine your future accomplishments. If you want to stay in school after graduation, I think my position should be given to you, no one is more suitable than you. Professor McGonagall nodded with satisfaction. She stretched out her wand and nodded, and the diamond turned into the candy that Artel had turned into before, and a rich fruity aroma rushed forward. Looks like you made up for the lack of last time. Professor McGonagall became more and more satisfied, and she looked at Artel without concealing her admiration for him. Artel, you earned 10 points for Slytherin. Under Artel's expectant gaze, Professor McGonagall affirmed and rewarded his efforts. Thank you, Professor. Artel's eyes widened, and now he's got 100 plot points. You deserve it. I don't think a low-level transfiguration can stop you. If you want, you can try to help other students. Professor McGonagall finished speaking and went on to teach other students. Artel began to help Neville and Harry Ron, explaining to them some of the key points of transfiguration. Pansy, who was sitting on the other side of the classroom, also heard Professor McGonagall's words. Her eyes lit up, she stood up from her seat, and ran to Artel. Artel, there's something I don't understand, I think you'll help me, we're all Slytherins after all. Pansy blinked, looking at Artel expectantly. When I finish teaching Neville. Before Artel could finish his sentence, Hermione interrupted him. No, Artel, let me teach Miss Parkinson, I think I'm good enough. With a flick of Hermione's wand, the beetle turned into a fudge, then a pebble. Although not as good as Artel, it is indeed enough experience. Pansy pursed her lips and stared at Hermione. Hermione looked at her without fear, and the eyes of the two little girls seemed to have flames burning. I don't want you to teach me. Pansy glared at Hermione. Humph. The two girls snorted at the same time, and then Hermione sat down angrily, and Pansy returned to her place angrily. Professor McGonagall noticed all this, and her expression was a little weird. Originally, she was worried that the scene on the first day of school would happen again, but now it seems that she is overthinking it. Excellent boys always attract girls' attention. It seems that Miss Parkinson, like Hermione, is also full of affection for Artel. This kind of thing, let them solve it by themselves. After all, this is also a kind of growth. Professor McGonagall's eyes were a little dazed, as if thinking of his former self. After the Transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall left. Hermione was going to the History of Magic in the afternoon, and Slytherin had no class, which meant that Artel was free in the afternoon. After lunch, Hermione finally couldn't hold back. She pulled Artel's sleeve and shook it, begging coquettishly. Artel, you are not allowed to go to the school doctor's office in the afternoon, and you are not allowed to take care of Pansy. I have something to do in the afternoon, how can I have time to pay attention to them? Artel has refined 100 bottles of powerful orc potions during this time, and he intends to visit Warwick. During this time, it should gather a lot of werewolf descendants. Really, after receiving Artel's reply, Hermione's mood was much better, and a smile appeared on her face unconsciously. Then I'm going to class. Well, let's have dinner together tonight. Artel reached out and scratched Hermione's nose. Hermione didn't hide. After saying goodbye to him with a blushing face, she went to Sister Petal to go to class with her. After Hermione left, Artel went to the basement. After returning to the bedroom, Artel took out the Isel crystal and checked Warwick's location. At this time, Warwick and his tribe were in the Cumbria Mountains in southern England. Artel observed that there are about 300 werewolf descendants in Warwick's tribe today. He now has 100 bottles of strong orc potion in his hand, although it is far from enough, it does not matter. The earlier the potion is given to them, the stronger the Warwick tribe's ability to protect itself. After some preparations, Artel put on the Lord of the Rings, and after leaving the lounge, he came to the screaming shack from the passage under the beating willow, and then used apparition to disappear in place. Cumbria Mountains. Warwick and 10 other Wolf Clan strong orcs are sitting around the bonfire. 2 wild boars are roasting on the bonfire, surrounded by a few circles of wolf cubs who have not yet drank the potion. They are greedy. He sniffed the aroma in the air, and the saliva almost flowed all over the place. After becoming strong orcs, Warwick's living habits also changed. Originally eating raw meat, they changed to eating barbecued meat. Of course, this was because of the influence of the blood of the centaurs in the medicine. Suck it. Warwick, who was roasting the fire, twitched his nose twice. It stood up, and the other Wolf Clan strong orcs also stood up, their noses twitched, and finally looked in the same direction. Vigilance is good. Artel's figure emerges from the void. It was a strong orc who saw it was Artel, and they all knelt on the ground. Owner. Warwick bowed his head respectfully. You have done a good job. I am very satisfied that you have found so many werewolf descendants in a short period of time. It's my pleasure. Warwick replied excitedly. He couldn't help wagging his tail, because Artel's compliment made him feel very happy and very happy. After adapting to the changes brought about by the potion of the strong orcs, Warwick has become smarter and smarter. Sooner or later, the strong orcs of the wolf tribe can develop into an intelligent race like the horses. Artel touched Warwick's head, walked to the bonfire and sat down, found a knife from the system space, cut a piece of barbecue and tasted it. Because there is no seasoning, there is only the most original aroma of barbecue, but the meat is a bit woody, and Artel is not used to it. Tell me about what happened to you recently. Have you encountered a wizard or something? Artel glanced around and saw a white wolf cub. His eyes lit up, and he reached out to find it. The wolf cub floated in the air, wailing in fear. Its mother seemed to be beside her, baring her fangs at Artel, but Warwick glanced at it and immediately fell to the ground with a whimper. Artel took the little white wolf in his arms and handed over the piece of meat he just cut. The little wolf cub sniffed and snorted and ate. Artel listened to Warwick's report while stroking the little white wolf's smooth fur. After Warwick left the Forbidden Forest with his tribe, he traveled through several mountain ranges and, relying on his developed sense of smell, found 2 werewolf descendants. These groups were created unconsciously by wizards with lycanthropy, and after decades of development, they became the size they are today. Warwick killed the Wolf King by force, subdued the 2 groups, and brought them all the way south to here. Because Warwick and the others have always traveled through the mountains and forests, they have never encountered humans or wizards. Fantastic beasts did encounter a lot, but they were all killed by Warwick. It should have become organic fertilizer by now. In the future, you should build a tribe here, and then send strong orcs out to continue looking for the descendants of werewolves and expand the group as much as possible. In addition, I will also inquire about the places where werewolves haunted more. If you encounter wizards, don't contact them for the time being. When the time is right, I will let you show up in the wizarding world. Artel put the little white wolf on the ground, took out 100 bottles of refined potions and handed them over to Warwick. He plans to wait for Warwick to build the tribe, and then bury the steel that he spent 300 plot points in exchange under the tribe's ground. Then make up a story for their tribe to protect the baby from generation to generation, wait until the Wolf Clan strong orc contacts the wizarding world, and then spread the news, then this stone tablet will naturally appear in the vision of all wizards. Warwick took the potion and knelt on the ground respectfully. It was not until Artel left that Warwick stood up again. 11 strong orcs began to select the strong wolf cubs in the clan to distribute potions. In just a short time, 100 strong orcs were born, and the strength of the entire clan also happened. Earth-shaking changes. When Artel returned to Hogwarts, only 2 hours had passed. Hermione's class was not over yet. Although there was a Quidditch match outside, Artel was not interested. After thinking about it, Artel decided to go back to the dormitory. But before he got to the basement, he saw an unexpected person. Nagini. She actually found it. Hermione said, "Don't let me go to the infirmary, don't let me pay attention to Pansy." I didn't go to the infirmary and Nagini is not Pansy, so that's okay. Artel muttered like a curse. Nagini looked at him curiously and took the initiative to come up. "Hi, your name is Artel, right?" "That's right, Miss Nagini, do you have anything to do with me?" Artel didn't ask how Nagini knew he was here, because that would make him look stupid. The answer is obvious. Because Artel was sitting in Gryffindor's seat at dinner yesterday, besides Hermione, there were Neville and the others beside him. Nagini could get clues from Neville if he wanted to inquire about him. Then, just wait for yourself at the entrance to the Slytherin Lounge, which is the basement. A lot of Slytherin's little wizards looked over. Artel didn't panic at all, because he knew that these little snakes would not go to Hermione to complain. "Nothing, I just wanted to see you." Nagini smiled slightly. She hesitated, and asked, "Student Artel, do you know a wizard named Saruman?" "No." Nagini's eyes lit up slightly, and then he heard Artel say, "Saruman is the evil great wizard who attacked the Ministry of Magic in London on Christmas Eve," Minister Fudge said in the Daily Prophet. "He was the dark wizard who spread terror." Artel chattered out the impressions of most wizards in the wizarding world about Saruman. Nagini's mouth twitched, she lightly stroked her broken hair, and said with a smile, "It turns out that, then it's okay, Artel, if you have any discomfort, you can come to the infirmary to find me, goodbye." For that unknown reason, Nagini was full of affection for Artel. She smiled at Artel, turned and left the basement. Artel looked at her back, thought for a moment, and continued walking towards the Slytherin Lounge. He doesn't know his master, so where does my affinity for him come from? Could he be a bloodcursed orc too? No. Dumbledore seems to have mentioned this little guy, saying he was the most handsome Hogwarts ever. A gifted wizard. Could he be Credence's child? Impossible. Credence is Dumbledore's relative. If this child is also, Dumbledore cannot possibly not know. Nagini feels a little strange. She has no relatives in this world, and her best friend Credence is gone. Now the only person who has a relationship with herself is Saruman, who signed a soul contract. So where does this intimacy come from? Nagini can be sure that it is not ordinary intimacy, but an urge to treat the other person as a vital person, even willing to give everything. Alas, I can't contact the master now, it's annoying. Nagini sighed. Newt and Tina are coming back tonight. I really don't know how to deal with them, although I didn't mean to deceive, but... The tangled Nagini returned to the school doctor's room, and was taken aback as soon as he came in. There was a long queue in the school doctor's office. "Thank goodness, Nagini, you're finally back." Madame Pomfrey breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Nagini and said, "In the Quidditch match just now, all the batsmen were injured. Today's quaffle is indeed a bit weird. Also, today a total of 12 boys fell out of the air due to the loss of control of their brooms while flying. 7 lads were injured in a fight." Madame Pomfrey looked at Nagini, who had changed into her nurse uniform, and said helplessly, "All in all, the school doctor's office is busy now. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.